Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 163. It's the UFC 226 preview show. I'm Dennis Shkradov here with Kasper Rozdolowski, ahead of a pretty epic weekend in the sport of MMA. And I'm not talking about the Team Australia, Team Philippines brawl in the basketball over there. Jesus Christ, Cas. What a halafel that was. People flying everywhere, chairs thrown. That was more like a WWE event than a UFC fight. But alas, no breakdown on that. It was pretty crazy. Big breakdown on this event coming this weekend. A lot of fun fights to talk about and some fun guests.
Yeah, that's right. We got a whole bunch of sexy, fun guests. Tommy Toehold is returning to the program to preview UFC 226 in the hilarious way that only Tommy Toehold can. He's a hilarious guy and also one of the nicest guys behind the scenes. So definitely support him. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. Follow him on Twitter at Tommy Toehold. He definitely deserves it. Also, we got Sheehan. If you're not on Team Sheehan, better be part of Team Sheehan. He's coming back on the program. Give us his sexy analysis. I feel like we get Sheehan a lot after fights, and we get him on those, random shows when, we're not necessarily previewing shows. But Sheehan is an excellent analyst, so I'm really, really excited to get him on the program, get his thoughts. We've also got John Morgan, the man about town, the man. He's, I think, literally hours away from attending the MMA Awards, so I don't know whether we're going to get him on. He's already going to be wearing his suit. I believe he's going to be doing a bit of pre-drinks, so very, very lucky to have him joining us on the program. I mean, the man has been to so many Hall of Fame ceremonies, so many international fight weeks, so who better to get this preview on with? And also Dan Hardy, going to be previewing UFC 226, the main event, the co-main event, going into in-depth analysis, so I'm pumped, man. It's a sexy show.
Yeah, it's a real sexy show, and it's exciting because a big event's coming up, and I think we've got some great dudes to break it down with. And also, Cass, because this is such a big event and it's of such large magnitude, we have an exciting announcement for everybody out there that the next episode of Submission Radio will be a day after the event. It will be our reactions. It's sort of going back to the old school days of Submission Radio, so coming out a little bit sooner after the event. So that's because we want to give you guys the reactions that you want, the reactions that you deserve. So be prepared for our reactions, thoughts, and sort of breakdowns of the performances this coming weekend. And oh golly God, is there a lot of performances to look at, Cass. I mean, you could be looking at things like the main event from the tough finale is Israel Adesanya going to do it against Brad Tavares. Earlier on, a guy like Dan Hooker, a big name in New Zealand MMA as well, he's going to be able to do it against Gilbert Burns. Of course, the big boys battling it out. What's going to happen? Will Brock Lesnar come down from the rafters like Sting and WCW? Will Jon Jones make a crazy announcement and run in a mask with a baseball bat? Who knows is going to happen? We'll be breaking it down the day after the event, so you guys can look forward to that. That's pretty exciting, isn't it, Cass?
I'm pumped, man. We haven't done like a post-fight breakdown immediately after the fights in quite a while, so I'm excited, man. It's going to be good times. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media, facebook.com/Submission Radio AU. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, what are you doing with your life? Probably better and more important things. But when you're done with those things, maybe give us a subscribe. Shout out to anybody listening on the podcast platforms, iTunes, Podcast One, Stitcher, TuneIn, SoundCloud. Jesus, there's like a million of them. Acast, and all the other ones that we never do mention anymore. But just letting you know, if you haven't jumped on YouTube, and you can watch us in video. So just letting you know, those are the options as well. Also, our DMs are open on Twitter, @SubmissionAUS. You can message us anytime. We do enjoy chatting with you guys. You can also message us on Facebook. And if you want to send us any extended emails, info@submissionradio.com, where we can chat extensively. We had someone email us the other day asking what sort of equipment we used. And I gave a nice breakdown of literally every single piece of equipment, from this mic hat to this microphone to this arm stand, everything else. I believe it was a guy in there. I want to say his name was George. And, we like it. We like chatting with you guys. So keep those rolling in.
There was a bit of an epic photo posted on Instagram from a night out that we had with MMA Media in New York. That one time I forgot my ATM card behind the bar, and Casper had to put up with us catching an Uber back to get it back.
And it was New York, so it was a long trip, and it was an expensive Uber. The American dollars, they're not kind to us. And I remember, we were just so fucking tired. And it was like, it was one of those nights you're like, I can't wait to get to bed. It was like, I don't know, 30, 40-minute trip back home. And then like, we're literally 5 minutes away. I could smell my bed from around the corner. I was like, oh man, it's going to be sweet. And then you're like, hey dude, I forgot my card. We need to go back. And I just died inside. I just died. But it's all good.
It was a good night. Some celebrity appearances by guys like Aljamain Sterling. You guys can check out the photo right now on the page. See how many media members you can spot. There's a lot of fun guys there. We had a great night. So jump on Instagram, because this week, guess what? Another fun photo from the Submission Radio personal album archive. So if you follow us on Instagram, be prepared to see something else fun coming up this weekend. You're only able to see these photos, of course, on Instagram, not Twitter or Facebook. So something different for all you guys out there who want to check that out, Cass.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, the order for the guest this week is Sheehan kicking things off with some sexy analysis. John Morgan sort of showing everybody a good time, and then Dan Hardy giving us more analysis. And I know Dan Hardy spoke about his return with Luke Thomas on the MMA Hour, but I kind of want to pick his brains a little bit just about what that return entails. And if maybe it's this year, because he's been teasing November, Madison Square Garden, so I wonder if that's still potentially in play. So yeah, there's a lot to speak about, a lot of people to speak to. I'm pumped. And Dennis, I believe our first guest online, you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest to kick off the show is known for participating in the FIFA Media Challenge. I say participating for a reason. Unfortunately, he didn't win it. But now, with the hearts aflutter with the FIFA World Cup, he joins us back on Submission Radio to preview UFC 226. He, of course, is the man behind Severe MMA, the legend himself, Sheehan. Heel Sean joins us back on Submission Radio. Sean, welcome back to the program. Quick question. FIFA happening right now. I know you're watching it. Does it hurt your heart of hearts when you think back to that media challenge that went down, the initial one?
Well, I suppose it was made better today by England smashing Danny Segura's Colombia, so that was great. Heartbreak. Obviously got that last-minute goal just to give him a bit of hope, but then it was just dashed by England and Jordan Pickford and Marcus Rashford as well. I'm a Man United fan. He scored a brilliant penalty, an important penalty after Colombia had just missed one. Or maybe didn't, but he got one anyway. So and Colombia went on to lose, and it's basically like Danny Segura. It's just you come up against someone on their platform and their game. Like, he played me on Xbox. I don't even have an Xbox. I don't even know what Xbox is basically. If he played me on PS4, I'd absolutely destroy him. Just like England got past Colombia pretty easily tonight. They got a lucky goal just to keep him in the game. Drug it out the penalties, just kicking people around the place, falling around all day. Absolutely disgraceful. Similar tactics to what Danny Segura used to. Some people call it a win. Some people call it a fluke. Whatever you want to call it yourself. That's what he got over me. Fair play to him.
And Danny's a bit of a rising star over there at MMA Fighting now in the MMA Hour. Obviously, things have changed. Looks like New York Rick has dropped him as a client, moved over to ESPN. He now has Luke Thomas, who is probably more of a soccer nut than any one of those dudes ever were. Are we looking at rescheduling this challenge with FIFA being at the top of everybody's mind and possibly at your platform this time, Sean?
Yeah, look, I'm up for it. Name a time, name a place. Like, at least Danny has gone up in the world a bit. He's moved from New York Rick to Luke Thomas.
Do you think Luke Thomas is better or worse for him? Because I feel like Luke would be very judgy if this doesn't go Danny's way.
Yeah, but could you get worse than New York Rick, really? Not exactly sure. So, look, he's gone up. Luke, I feel Luke could be, motivational. He'll tell, he knows about the game. He'll tell Danny how to play the game. It won't do him much good, but I think it'll actually improve Danny as a player, and that's all anyone should ever want, is to improve. And look, New York Rick clearly wasn't improving him. He was trying to move in his turf. He was, he was trying to use my name to make himself bigger. And look what happened. He got himself a job at ESPN, so it worked. Fair play to him.
I think it's an interesting dynamic because, look, I don't want to offend you here, Sean, but for the record, I think New York Rick was a pretty amazing manager. In Luke Thomas, you've got more of a coaching role. And the good thing is, if you guys do this rematch, Monday morning analyst comes around. Guess what Luke Thomas is analyzing? Maybe even commentating for the event, right?
My win, yeah. Like, I'm saying it right here, right now. If he wants to play PlayStation 4, the last time we did it was after one of the big events on a Sunday. This Sunday, UFC 226 is coming up on Saturday night, Sunday. Let's get this game going. Danny Segura, where you at? I'll take him down easy. I think I'd beat him by at least 3 or 4 goals easily on PS4. So there you go. If you want to do it, let's roll.
Hashtag FIFA Media Challenge. Let's talk about UFC 226 because this is a big card. UFC 225 also a big card, stacked top to bottom, but it looks like the main event here will be drawing a lot more eyes to the pay-per-view. I'm wondering, Sean, what are you sort of anticipating when we find out the pay-per-view buys and the prelim views for this show? Do you think it'll be a pleasant surprise, or do you think it'll be sort of more of the same?
I think it's tough to know, really. I think it will be a little bit in between, the normal kind of pay-per-view we have for, a Tyron Woodley or a Demetrius Johnson is somewhere in the range of 100,000 to 250,000 pay-per-view buys. I have a feeling
Jeez, 100,000. Can you imagine that? That would.
I think one of the last pay-per-views did it. I was listening to the Dave Meltzer podcast there recently, and I think one of the pay-per-views did 100,000 buys. I'm not exactly sure which one it was, but that is around what they're doing now. Maybe most of them 150, maybe 200,000, but this one, I have a feeling it might get towards the 350, 400,000 pay-per-view buys. I think they'll be hoping it'll do a little bit more, and maybe if something happens this week, if there's a good press conference or if there's a shoving match or something, he can push it up a bit, or if Brock Lesnar turns up or something like that, maybe if he's seen around Vegas on International Fight Week, maybe that's something that can push it up. But I think it's going to be around that 350, 400,000 mark. If it did over 400,000, I think it's a huge success. But look, it could because it has that super fight, a genuine super fight as well. I know a lot of people talk about super fights and they call everything a super fight, but what a super fight is a current champion against another current champion, and that's what we have here. It's a real super fight. We have a tremendous fight in the co-main event as well. Tremendous fights the whole way down through the card, to be honest. And if this one can sell, nothing will sell apart from McGregor and Rousey and Brock Lesnar or whoever you want. But I think this is an important card for the sport and for the UFC themselves, so they can see actually what level they're actually at going into all these new TV deals, which we've talked about before. But there's talks of less pay-per-views and things like that. Maybe if this one doesn't sell as much, maybe that's something that can be accelerated. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see what Dave Meltzer tells us in a few weeks.
It's fascinating what the pay-per-view market is like in general. For example, a crazy statistic was I was watching something about the WWE, and WrestleMania 17 was over 1 million pay-per-view buys, which is crazy if you think about a wrestling event generating that much. But obviously they went to the network for a reason. They stopped making that amount of pay-per-view buys a long, long time ago, and I think the UFC are sort of in a similar predicament here. Let me ask you about Stipe as a draw, Sean. I mean, obviously, he's not the most outspoken guy. We like speaking to him. We have a good relationship with him. We've known him for quite some time. But we know also that when you're about to interview him, he's not going to really be giving you too many headlines or really saying anything out of the ordinary. It's probably going to be a one-word answer most of the time. Do you think if he beats DC here, it kind of gives him more star power? Do you think he becomes more of a draw from this fight? Or do you think he'll sort of remain around the same area that he's been in for the last couple of fights?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to change. Like, there's some people who are draws, there's some people who try to be draws, and there's some people who will never be draws. And I think Stipe Miocic is one of those people who will never be draws. And it's not that he's not good. You can be... Look at Demetrius Johnson. For me, the greatest fighter to ever live, pound for pound. And he's not a draw and never will be a draw. Like, Stipe has the heavyweight championship of the world on his back, which helps. And he's fighting Daniel Cormier, and there's 2 belts on the line, which helps. So I think that will inflate this a little bit. And DC is a bit of a draw as well because he has the big Jon Jones matches and stuff. But let's say Stipe comes in here, Derrick Lewis wins at the weekend. It's Stipe versus Derrick Lewis. Is that drawing anything? No. He drawn versus Cain Velasquez a little bit, but not much. I don't like draws.
What about Brock Larson?
Brock Lesnar, you mean? That'd be a draw, but we know why that's a draw. We know why Conor McGregor and Eddie Alvarez was a draw, and it wasn't Eddie Alvarez. Like, we know why Ronda Rousey and all her fights were big draws. Liz Carmouche wasn't drawn.
Sarah McMahon did not draw that most of the pay-per-view buys for that fight.
Sarah McMahon's on Team Sheehan, so I better not say anything bad about her. No, but that's the kind of the way it is. If he'll be a draw if he comes up against a draw, but himself as a draw, that's never going to happen.
All right, dude. Well, while we're talking about the heavyweights, let's just quickly talk about the landscape a little bit later on in the interview, we'll get your prediction for the Derrick Lewis Ngannou fight. But these guys are fighting on the card. What do you think they're fighting for, and how does it play into the current landscape of you've got your Curtis Blades, you got your Volkov, you got a bunch of heavyweights sort of floating around in the division, and we kind of know that possibly Brock Lesnar will be stepping up for the next title. So you got Cain Velasquez floating around. What is the winner of this sort of go to next? And if you're sort of matchmaking in your head and you're taking away that title shot because, let's say, Brock Lesnar's got it for the time being, how would you like to see the division sort of pan out for the time being?
See, this Ngannou Lewis fight is kind of like, you know, in golf when someone they get the clubhouse lead and they have their score and it's set, and then the rest of them have to go out and beat or hold their score, hold their better score. This is what Derrick Lewis has a chance to do at the weekend. He has a chance to win this fight and put himself in pole position. And he'll only be in pole position if Brock Lesnar falls out, and if maybe Cain Velasquez, if this whole thing doesn't happen with Cain Velasquez, if he can come back, if there isn't a big fight for him that'll put him into it. You know, if those two things don't happen, I think Derrick Lewis will get the shot, but he has to obviously beat Francis Ngannou. If you look at the other people in there, Curtis Blades is there as well. He's you know, he's done well as well, but I think that they'd give it to Lewis before him, to be honest. Same goes for Alexander Volkov. You know, Overeem has had his had his title shot not too long ago. I don't think he's getting another one. And beyond that, then what is there? You know, there's Junior Dos Santos, Mark Hunt, Tai Tuivasa, you know, one of your guys, and you know, there isn't really much after that.
Where are you fitting him into the picture?
Just quickly before you go, my God, Sean, did you watch the countdown? Because I don't watch countdowns anymore, but I watched this one. Okay, but mainly because we'll promise that some of one of the preview episodes is going to be used on the countdown. We obviously promised us. They didn't. They used every other podcast. They didn't use this one. But like, it was really funny. They literally had like every single show ever except ours. I was like, damn it, wasted 20 minutes.
In a row, right, Cass?
Beg your pardon? Yeah. They contacted us. They're like, we're going to use it for the UFC 225. We're like, really? The Stipe Ngannou preview? All right, use whatever you can find there. They didn't. And then they're like, we're going to use it for 226. They didn't. I was like, might as well just neck myself here. But it was a good countdown. But the thing is, like, and you'll see this if you watch it, Cain Velasquez, my God, like, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but he looks so much older. He looks so much different. You know, he's got the shaved head now, and it's just crazy, even the way they were talking about him and portraying him in the countdown. I know it's not his fight or anything, but they were talking about him like, you know, like almost like a Mark Coleman, like, oh, he's the former champion, former this, back in the day, I used to be champion back in the day. And it's just crazy that this is a guy that, you know, we're still talking about as potentially, you know, fighting for the title soon. But I just got this sense like they were painting almost as if the MMA world has completely moved on, you know, past him, and we don't even know if he'll ever ascend to that throne again. But at the same time, like you mentioned, there's not too many fresh faces, and I still feel like Cain versus Stipe, it's not necessarily a super fight, but it's a really, really, really big matchup. Do you expect the UFC to completely thrust him forward into a title shot as quick as they possibly can? Do you think it's smart for him to maybe take a warm-up fight before he fights a guy like Stipe on, you know, such a huge layoff?
They're definitely not going to give him a title shot straight away. He needs a fight, you know.
Yeah.
Even, you know, if something like, let's say Brock Lesnar comes back, or, you know, there could be a rematch in this fight at the weekend. We never know. If it's close, there's the champion versus champion. No, if DC wins, we could see a rematch. Something like that could happen. You know, if Derrick Lewis wins, even if Ngannou wins, the winner of that versus Cain Velasquez, you know, that sounds good to me. Curtis Blades versus Cain Velasquez, that sounds good to me. You know, one fight, that's all he needs. Win that one fight. Beat Derrick Lewis, beat Ngannou, beat Curtis Blades. You straight away, Cain Velasquez is in a title shot. You know, we saw it with Dominic Cruz before it happened with him when he was out for so long. You know, we've seen it with other people. They come back, get the one fight back, and they're straight into it. I think that's, you can't put Cain Velasquez into a title shot now, because can he stay fit? You know, can he stay healthy? I think he needs to prove that. Like, it's been so weird with Cain Velasquez, because he had all these big bad injuries, and he came back from them, and he came back, and he was supposed to fight, and he hurt his back, doesn't he? And he wanted to fight, but they pulled him out of the fight, and we haven't seen him in like 18 months. Like, where is Cain Velasquez? You know,
well, Javier Mendez said he's been healthy since the start of the year, so it's kind of crazy that we haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, it's very odd. Like, I watched Embedded, I think it was, and he was like sparring away and you know, hitting pads and stuff. He looked grand. He actually looked fitter than I had seen him. Maybe that thing you were watching was filmed a while ago, but you know, there was pictures going around of him a few months ago where he looked out of shape, looked terrible. He looked good. He didn't look bad in this. You know, he was sparring away with DC and stuff. Like, it's a very odd thing. When this fight was announced, and this fight was announced like 5 or 6 months ago, I said, put Cain Velasquez on this card, put him in the co-main event, or obviously it would be the third or fourth fight down now because of the other title fight, but put him on this card. He isn't even booked in a card like in 2 months' time. I really don't know what the situation is with Cain Velasquez, and you'd think they'd be trying to rush to get Cain Velasquez back in, but maybe it's him. Maybe he doesn't want to rush back. Maybe he wants to be 100% healthy before he comes back, and you can't blame him for that. But it's a very odd situation.
Maybe it's the fact that Lesnar's around the corner. Let's say DC wins, then he wants to fight Lesnar. If Cain fights now, how long does he sit out for a title, Sean?
Yeah, and Lesnar as well. There's so many moving parts to this because Lesnar's waiting for Jon Jones. I think we all know that. If Jon Jones comes back, if he doesn't get this suspension, I think Lesnar versus Jones will happen. Then the heavyweight division and the light heavyweight division can kind of move on. But it's all up in the air now. I think this week will tell a lot. And when's Jon Jones? I want to know when Jon Jones is going to get started out with USADA, because Daniel Cormier is fighting this weekend, and I would not put it past Jon Jones or his team to have USADA and their recommendations or whatever you want to call it come out this week. I would not put it past them at all. I really wouldn't.
Just steal his thunder.
I don't know. Yeah, I really wouldn't. Imagine if it came out Saturday night, 10 p.m. Eastern time or whatever it is. Jon Jones has been cleared to fight. He's got 1 year suspension. He's or 18 months suspension or whatever. He's going to be back in 2 months' time, and he's ready to fight. And they announced the Brock Lesnar fight. There's Daniel Cormier sitting in the. What the fuck is I'm fighting a super fight here in an hour's time? But I don't know. That's just all in my head. So that'll probably happen, but I wouldn't put it past them.
It's like MMA Days of Our Lives, except you couldn't script stuff like this. It's ridiculous. Let's talk about the predictions for this one, Sean. I want to start off with the main event, the super fight, Stipe versus DC. A lot of people are going with Stipe here. Who are you going with? How do you think it goes?
I really don't know. This is one of the fights I really, really don't know. If you force me to give a pick, I'm going to pick Cormier. Look, this is an interesting fight because I think they're both very similar fighters, and when I say similar, a lot of the things they do are very different. But where do they want to fight? They both want to fight on the front foot. Cormier wants to go forward. Stipe wants to go forward. They do it in different ways. Cormier has a lot of output. He'll push you against the fence. He'll try to take you down. He'll get on top. Stipe has a kind of, he works in with his footwork, throws leg kicks, comes in around with hooks, throws straight shots, throws big hard shots. And like that battle for the front foot, and I say it a lot with different fights, but in these high-level, huge fights like this, that battle for the front foot is going to be huge. If someone can dominate that battle for the front foot, I think they'll win the fight pretty easily. If it's back and forth, it's going to be a back and forth fight. If someone can bring out something new, maybe fight off the back foot, if they can come out with counters, if they can come out with takedowns from someone coming forward, if they can drop a level and, come, let's say Stipe throws a big right hand over top, DC drops a level, comes up, runs the pipe, takes him down. There's a lot of integers that can happen in this. Personally, I think DC's forward pressure is really good. And he's used to fighting people similar enough to Stipe. I think Alexander Gustafsson is a better version of Stipe in the way he fights, not in what he produces, obviously, because Stipe can hit a lot harder and some of his skills are better, but I think he's used to fighting that. He was able to get the front foot against Alexander Gustafsson. He was able to do it against Jon Jones, although Jon Jones is such a good fighter off the back foot, and he's such a good fighter in so many different areas that he was able to beat DC, but he's been able to always get it against those guys. And I think if he gets it against Stipe, if he comes out with huge output, wins the hand fighting, comes in, lands lots of shots on the inside. If he can make it an in-fight, I think he'll beat Stipe there. I think he'll be able to take him down. I think if he gets on top, it's going to be a hard night for Stipe getting back up. I don't think Stipe has the plan B to go back and take Cormier down. Now, Cormier has been taken down in the past. Gustafsson took him down, but he can't. I don't think Stipe has the ability to keep Cormier down. He could take him down, sure. I don't think he'll keep him down. I don't think he's the ability to push him up against the fence for long periods like he's done in other fights. Look, Stipe's thing is win the front foot, land big shots. And can he do that? He 100% can. And I wouldn't put it past him at all. But I favour Cormier to win that battle. I think it'll be a close fight. I think it'll probably go at least 4 rounds, probably most likely go to a decision, but I'm picking Cormier.
I still remember Joey Beltran taking Stipe down years and years and years ago, and of course that was his UFC debut, so how much can you really take away from that? But, there have been non-wrestler guys take Stipe down, and, DC's probably the first pure wrestler that he's fought. I'm definitely not going to knock you on that pick. I think for me the biggest question is, if he does take him down, can DC keep Stipe down? It's going to be a fascinating one. Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega. What do you think about this one, Sean? I think this is going to be a fairly tough night for Brian Ortega. I think Max Holloway may be able to keep him on the outside, but man, Ortega's pressure when he keeps coming at you and he makes fighters panic and he just doesn't have any fear of the takedown. It makes people make mistakes. What do you think about this one?
I think it's interesting because I actually think the exact opposite. I think Max Holloway is going to try to pressure him, and I think Brian Ortega is going to try to keep it on the outside. And if you come to me and ask me this question before the Frankie Edgar fight, I would have said exactly what you said. But then that Frankie Edgar fight happened, and he kept him on the outside with his jab, used beautiful angles, beautiful footwork, just every shot in the book. He improved tenfold with his striking in that fight. My thing is, right, this is a huge fight for Max Holloway because we know how Max Holloway is going to beat Brian Ortega. He's going to beat him on the feet, right? Let's say he can't beat him on the feet. What's he going to do then? Can he take Brian Ortega down? No, he can't. So Brian Ortega has this, right? He has this fight. If he can stop Max Holloway dominating him on the feet, there's no way Max Holloway can beat him. It's one of those situations. Like it's if he can be ultra defensive, do what he did against Frank Edgar, keep him on the outside of the jab, keep moving around, frustrate him, make him come in, and do exactly what you said there. If he makes Max Holloway get mad, makes him get over aggressive, makes him come into him, makes him throw shots from out far, we see what he can do. He can latch onto a neck in 2 seconds. He can, he doesn't have the best takedowns in the world or anything like that. He can jump he can do a flying triangle. That's Brian Ortega. I think this fight is huge. I think Max Holloway is a tremendous fighter. He's one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world, and I think he will win the fight. I think he is smart enough. I think he's good enough on the feet to beat Brian Ortega. I think his forward pressure will be too much. I think he'll be able to hurt Brian Ortega over 2-3 rounds. But Brian Ortega is so dangerous, and watching tape coming into this fight and doing analysis on it, it's one of those fights where my head puts me both ways. Like I looked at that Frankie Edgar fight, and I thought, can Brian Ortega do that to Max Holloway? And he can. I think he can do that to Max Holloway, and I think he can beat him that way. But will he, though, in this big stage, for the title, on the biggest card of the year, can he step up and do it? Max Holloway's done it before. He's fought Jose Aldo. He's fought Jose Aldo twice. He's fought in big nights. Fought Anthony Pettis. One of the most famous guys in the UFC. He's been in those big nights, and I think that matters in this situation. I think this is a brilliant fight. I really do. And even the best thing about this fight, he can win the striking, Holloway can win the striking, and if he gets to the ground, win that. But Max Holloway can be winning this fight for beating Ortega, taking it. And I think that's what makes this fight brilliant. What makes it exciting. What makes Brian Ortega really exciting. Max Holloway, he's one of the most exciting fighters in the world as well, but I'm really looking forward to this one. These two fights, I really don't know who's going to win. I'm picking Max Holloway, I'm picking DC. I could be totally wrong. I could really be wrong, both of them.
Well, let's go to a fight where the pick might be a little bit easier. Francis Ngannou versus Derrick Lewis. I mean, we saw there's some holes in Ngannou's game after the Stipe fight, but Lewis doesn't really look like the kind of guy that's going to go in there, going to be going for takedowns, trying to wrestle Ngannou. Do you anticipate that he surprises us and he comes in with a masterful game plan here, or do you think Ngannou goes in there and starts unleashing the beast?
Yeah, I think you probably have it right there. I think Lewis will try to go for a takedown. He's not going to be jumping for double legs or anything like that. I think he'd probably go for a body lock, try to push him up against the fence, try to get him on the ground. Derrick Lewis has one of the best mounts in MMA. Just, maybe not technical, definitely not technical. He's not Damian Maia or anything like that. But when he gets in the mount and he starts beating on you, throwing elbows, throwing those big fists, he's a demon. You're not getting him off. He's as dangerous as Brian Ortega on the ground if he gets you in that position. He's absolutely killing you. But look, if Francis Ngannou, for 3 minutes of the first round, if he can keep him out, keep the clinch, keep out of the clinch, keep off the ground, keep his back from the ground. You know, don't catch a big shot from Derrick Lewis, which I don't think that's going to happen. He'll knock him out and he'll beat him. But the big thing coming into this fight is, has Francis Ngannou shored up those holes in his game? And it's not just the wrestling holes in these issues. It's a mental thing as well, because Francis Ngannou could come out here and win the first 2 or 3 minutes, win the first round, go into the second round, and he throws a shot, goes over the top, and they end up in a clinch, and they end up against a cage, and he could say in his mind, oh no, here I am again. He could end up on the ground, and it could be all over in 2 seconds. And it's just a mental block. Something like that could change. It might have absolutely nothing to do with the training he's done. It might have nothing to do with his ability on the ground, or his takedown defense, or his jiu-jitsu, or whatever. It might just be that click, and it's gone, and it's over. So that's an interesting thing to see here with Francis Ngannou. Has he improved? Okay, the technical, the physical, everything like that. But the mental is going to be important with Francis Ngannou. And it's not just him. I think it's with all fighters who give up a big... Look at Conor McGregor, what he did after the Nate Diaz fight. He came out after he lost to Nate Diaz. He proved the mental side. Everyone spoke about him being unbelievably mentally good. He got that. He obviously got choked out by Nate Diaz, beaten badly over 2 rounds, and he came back, showed that he had the mental fortitude to come out and go 5 rounds with him again. Does Francis Ngannou have the same thing? Can he mentally come out here, if he gets into bad positions, and beat Derrick Lewis? If he comes out and knocks him out in 15 seconds, obviously those questions won't be answered, and maybe they'll have to be answered down the line. But I think that's an interesting thing to come in here and think about when you're watching this fight. But overall, I do think Francis Ngannou should have a pretty easy night here, but you never know with Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis gets beaten up for 2.5 rounds, and then throws one punch and he knocks the guy out. He's done it multiple times. He can do it again, but I don't think he will here, to be honest.
I also wonder, with Derrick Lewis's back injury, he had that. So how confident would he be going in there? If it's not healthy, he wouldn't be confident. If it is healthy, how confident would it be to go and potentially re-injure it against a strong guy, in Ngannou, and trying to wrestle with him? But I'm with you, man. I'm picking Ngannou as well. As we let you go, Michael Chiesa versus Anthony Pettis. Who do you think takes this one? Because we've been waiting a long time for this one. Got derailed at UFC 223, so I'm glad we hopefully finally get to see it this weekend.
The thing about this one is I'm picking Chiesa on this one, but coming up to that UFC 223 was... Anthony Pettis was talking such a good game, and I've talked about Anthony Pettis so many times before that he's such a frustrating guy, because he's all the talent in the world, and he's so easy to beat. There's a blueprint there to beat Anthony Pettis. Push him up against the fence, take him down. But Anthony Pettis is dangerous as well, because if you try to push him up against the fence, he can throw a head kick at you and knock you out, or he can throw a front kick and throw a few leg kicks, hurt you that way, and the fight could be over. Even when you try to take him down, Anthony Pettis has more submissions than he has knockouts in his MMA career. He's an unbelievable guillotine. He submitted Charles Oliveira, but it's things like that which hurt Anthony Pettis, because he's too willing to accept those positions. He's too willing to go for the guillotine. And if he gets it, brilliant. But if he doesn't get it, he ends up on the ground and on his back and for 5 minutes. And then the next round, he'll come out again. And the same thing will happen. He'll get taken down, he'll go for the guillotine, and he'll end up on the ground for 5 minutes again. It's a fatal flaw in Anthony Pettis. If he could just move his feet, if he could just keep it on standing, if he could, just pivot left and right when someone comes in and not get pushed up against the fence, Anthony Pettis would still be one of the best fighters in the world. But I've said this before, all of his last 7 or 8 fights probably, and some of them have gone well, some of them gone badly. Sometimes he lands a knockout, sometimes he gets that submission. Michael Chiesa is really good on the ground. I find it hard to see him submitting him. He could do it. I just think Michael Chiesa is going to take him down and win a 3-round decision, to be honest. But I wouldn't put it past Pettis, but I'm definitely going with Chiesa.
It's going to be an exciting event of fights, obviously the tough finale as well. Guys, make sure to check out Sean on Twitter, at Sean Sheen. BA, of course, Severe MMA is the place to be. Patreon, a lot of extra podcasts. You guys can subscribe to that and check out all the extra stuff that's coming up. Just quickly, Sean, you're wearing a Jurassic Park t-shirt. Give us your Timothy Johnson mustache rating for the latest Jurassic Park. Have you seen it?
I have, yeah. It's good.
Out of 5.
What is it again? What's
Timothy
the scale
Johnson.
out of 5?
It's Timothy Johnson mustaches, and you can go decimals with the mustaches.
for what this film is, and entertainment. This is not going to be winning any Oscars or anything. But for what this film is, entertainment, fun. I'm going to give it. I can give decimal places, and I'll tell you why I'm taking away the decimal place. But I'm going to give it 4.9 out of 5.
Whoa.
Wow.
I really like, and I take away the one. Have you seen it? Have you seen the film?
I haven't seen it.
I've seen it. I have seen it.
Do you know the guy? He's like the guy who auctions the dinosaurs in the film. He's like an English guy. He's like this small little guy, and he annoyed me so much in the film because he's English.
Got a
and
natural evil face, right? He plays in Captain America and lots of movies like that.
He's a good actor and all, but he was putting on this terrible American accent, and I just couldn't get past it. I was like, "What the fuck you doing? Like, we know you're English. Like, you're putting on this awful accent. Just be English. Like, what's going on?" But apart from that, it was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it. You know, it was an exciting film. And I love Chris Pratt as well. Chris Pratt is Parks and Recreation is one of my favorite programs of all time. Chris Pratt is an absolute legend. I wish he was my best friend, but look, there you go. That's why.
Anna Faris is out of the picture, Sean. So it's totally a possibility.
I always said he could do better than her.
There you guys go. Sean, check out Severe MMA. Subscribe to Patreon. Just quickly, a couple of things that people can look forward to, the extra stuff. There's coming up. Yeah,
there's a big interview coming up in the next week or so. I won't say who it is now, but there's a big one coming up. Patreon.com/Severe MMA Podcast. We just did a friend of mine who works for Reuters. He's over at the World Cup. He's in Russia at the moment. Last night we did a podcast, so it's like the halfway point of the World Cup. We did a big podcast, and that we're going to have another one after the World Cup, so sign up for that. There's just loads of stuff there, loads of interviews, loads of Q&As after the podcast. We usually have about 4 or 5 podcasts a week. We're going to have more this week for UFC 226 and stuff. So it's €4, 10 cents a month. So I don't know whatever that is in Australian dollars or anything, but it's like the point of the price of a pint every month. So basically that's it. So sign up. Patreon.com/Severe MMA Podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sean. We look forward to everybody sign up, check it out, and it's going to be a fun weekend. Can't wait to see what you guys say on the program about it. Thanks so much, Sean.
Hey guys, it's Stipe Miocic, UFC heavyweight champion, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, fight fans, I'm the Pauly Shore Mixed Martial Arts Tommy Toehold, and this weekend at UFC 226, we have a super fight. Now, this phrase super fight, it has been around for some time now, and a lot of times it gets thrown around all willy-nilly. You got promoters and writers calling fights super fights, but what actually is a super fight? Well, as an absolute authority on absolutely nothing, I thought I'd weigh in and more specifically explain where this super fight between Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic ranks on the all-time list. First of all, if the two fighters fight in the same division and have done so for some time, it's not a fucking super fight, okay? It's just a fight. What is super about that? They're in the same division. They're fucking supposed to fight each other. If Conor McGregor ends up fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov, that fight is not a super fight. It's a big fight. It's a money fight. It's a super cool fight. But it's not a fucking super fight. Super fight means 2 different divisions. You know what else it means? It means 2 champions. I'm sorry, but it doesn't fucking count if you're not both champions. It just doesn't even make sense. When GSP fought Michael Bisping, that was a huge fight, and wow, what a moment. But it was not a fucking super fight. GSP was gone for 17 years before that fight. You can't give it super fight status. Another stipulation, you can't be fresh champs. If you've held the belt for 10 seconds and go fight another champ, let's hold off on the super fight shit for just a second. It's a huge fight and you're both champions, but if you've been champion for all of a morning shit, not exactly sure that qualifies that fight as a super fight. But this weekend, Stipe versus DC, that's a different story. Let's take a look at our criteria. Are they from different weight classes? Check. Are they both champions? Check. Are they both established champions? About as well as one ever could at heavyweight. That's 3 fucking checks. We have ourselves a legit super fight coming up this weekend. No bullshit, no hype. It is an actual super fight. Now that we've resolved that issue, where does this super fight rank in the list of all-time super fights? Well, let's do some MMA math because that always works out. Who is the best fighter of all time? If you don't factor in USADA failures and ruining their own career about 3 times, it's probably Jon Jones. The only person to beat Daniel Cormier, that would be Jon Jones. Stipe is the winningest heavyweight champion of all time, and the winner of this fight between Stipe and DC, barring a 4-year suspension, which, to be honest, is pretty fucking likely, will probably be fighting Jon Bones Jones next. Why? Because he's the best. He's the pinnacle. He's the Shao Kahn at the top of the MMA mountain. They both want to knock him off, and they both have legitimate shots. Now, if you're saying that Jon Jones is the greatest of all time, And if you're telling me that this super fight would likely determine who would then fight Jon Jones in the biggest fight of his career, I'm gonna go ahead and say that this is the biggest super fight in the history of combat sports. We will never get anything even remotely like this in the future. We can barely get fighters to fight each other in their own fucking divisions. This is as rare as Tito Ortiz being right about something, so savor it, soak it all in. Two of the best to ever do it are going to throw down this weekend, and even better, I have no idea what's going to happen, but it's going to be the biggest fight of all time. The winner is the master of the universe. They are in the GOAT discussion. This is Fedor Couture in their primes. This is GSP Anderson in their primes. This is a huge fucking fight, and they don't usually work out. Which reminds me, holy fuck, let's hope that nothing happens from now to weigh-ins. Ugh. See you on the internet, fight fans. Back to you guys.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, we've caught our next guest at the perfect time. The quiet time between his pre-drinking for the MMA Awards, of course. He is one of the most familiar voices in MMA, the Inspector Gadget of MMA. There's nothing that this man can't do. From single-handedly bringing up the profit margin for all Nando's stores around the world because of every media person now going there, to knowing the best bars in town after just being there for a matter of hours. I'm, of course, talking about Jon Morgan. Oh, and by the way, his MMA coverage is pretty legendary as well. Jon, welcome to the program.
You truly know me, dude. I was literally just Googling on the internet, like what bars I should go to as soon as I get dressed up to go to the World MMA Awards. This is the one time of year I put a suit on. So yeah. I got to take advantage. Go to some of those high class areas that don't normally let me in.
Wow, very nice. What kind of suit are we rocking here? Are we going the classic black? Are you doing the tuxedo? Are you doing the Conor McGregor fuck you suit with the nice pinstripes? What did you get? Well, if there was a Jon Morgan custom edition, like custom pinstripes, what do you reckon yours would say? Your pinstripes?
My pinstripes would just be hashtag frosty beverage, just up and down, you know?
Yes.
That's probably what I'd do. But yeah, just going simple black. I'm not quite all the way to a tuxedo, but just nice black jacket, some slacks, got a little gray shirt there. I keep it simple.
Nice,
wow.
Very nice.
Can't believe it. No one will recognize you. You do realize this, Jon. Nobody follow. It will be like, who is this Brad Pitt lookalike, and where's Jon Morgan?
It'd be like Superman when he takes off the glasses and no one knows who he is.
Yeah, that's it, dude. Me with a suit on, trust me, I don't get recognized.
I feel like the Jon Morgan suit would have like a cooling pouch where you could put like a can of Coors or something in there, so no one knows. But anyway, that takes me back when we were going to the horse races and he used to sneak beers in my socks. Now, let's talk about the MMA Awards, because we bring that up. You, of course, won Journalist of the Year in 2009, which was fantastic. Some great memories there. I remember looking at the photos back in those days, and back when me and Cass were big fans of you. Now we don't like you that much, Jon. You know how it is. But there's a bit of a rivalry there between you and Ariel Helwani. Both you guys are always sort of nominated for the Journalist of the Year. Now, once again, going into the awards, Jon, do you have any sort of words, any competitive words or any words of wisdom before you guys take on each other one more time?
F that guy. How about that? No, I'm just kidding. No, listen, I obviously, the competitor in me, I would love to win. It's an incredible honor to win. But honestly, and I mean this, I would really much rather us win Media Source of the Year. I'm really got my fingers crossed that MMA Junkie wins Media Source of the Year. I really like that one better. It's kind of like winning the Super Bowl versus winning the MVP or something like that. Our whole team busts their ass, man. They all deserve recognition. And while it's cool to have the individual award, I mean, trust me, I was incredibly honored to win. It's to me, I like it better when our whole team gets the recognition that we're doing a good job. So fingers crossed, MMA Junkie can win Media Source of the Year, and MMA Junkie Radio's in there as well. So fingers crossed for those boys as well.
That's awesome. And you being a man of the people, that's another awesome thing as well. And you guys do truly have an awesome team down there at MMA Junkie. Just quickly before we get off that topic, what are a couple of good drinking stories or potentially even drunk stories you can share from us behind the scenes of the event that stand out to you? I mean, a lot of years. I'm sure there's, quite a few stories that's been amassed over that time.
Oh man, it's a fun night. I'll be honest, when the awards first started, I think everybody was very apprehensive because we never had anything like this in our industry, and you know how MMA fans are. They like to hate on things or whatever, and so I think everybody was a little apprehensive when it first started. But it's become one of my most fun nights of the year. I love it because as you said, I mean, like, dude, when you see me, I'm normally wearing shorts and a polo shirt, man. it's the same for everybody else. I mean, guys and girls that are used to seeing in fight where, everybody's dressed up, all the ladies have on nice dresses, all the men have on nice suits. And so it's kind of fun just to see everybody like in a setting you don't normally see. So, we all as, journalists try to be professional about the way we do things, but it's kind of one night where everybody's kind of looking around at each other like, what the hell are we all doing dressed up? You know what I mean? So I really have a good time. And there was one year that did it. And they set us at tables. We were at like round tables, like at some of the award shows or whatever. And like Dan Henderson was at my table and Cyborg was at my table.
Wow.
And, everybody's having cocktails and talking. I mean, it's good time. Yeah. I mean, some of the drunker stories, those folks would probably appreciate it if I left those to those nights. But yeah, everybody does have a few cocktails. It's great because if you're a nominee, they have a kickoff, basically like a reception beforehand, like a VIP reception. So it's open bar for a little while. And so John Morgan's going to take good advantage of that open bar. Get a little pregame on, so you get yourself a little buzz for the show to start. And then afterwards, they usually have like an after party at a club or whatever. So yeah, it ends up being a fun night. I don't know. This is the first year we've done it like at the beginning of International Fight Week, which is like the busiest, craziest week ever. So I don't know, how well it'll be to kick things off with just a terrible hangover that I know I'm going to have tomorrow. But hey, you only live once, right? We'll sleep when we're dead.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, for people that don't know Fight Week, International Fight Week, that's the absolute pinnacle when it comes to the amount of work the MMA media do. Me and Casper still have, I suppose, nightmares, but / good memories of the UFC 200 weekend, which was absolutely crazy. That one had a whole bunch of stuff happening, but still lots of stuff happening on this one. Just sort of take us through a typical schedule that's sort of coming up for John Morgan. And in terms of sleep, are we looking at 1 or 2 hours over the next couple of days, or what's going on? I see you and Simon Head are going to be hitting up Adam Hunter's show as well, so that's going to definitely take out a few hours of sleep. A lot of Simon Head fans looking forward to seeing him there.
Yeah, we're gonna do that on Sunday. Like I decided, let's push that to the very end when all the work's done. If you want to schedule, this is the actual schedule on Thursday. Okay, in the morning we will get up and we will go to the Ultimate Fighter 27 official weigh-ins in the morning. As soon as that is over, we will head over to the UFC 226 Media Day, where we will speak to damn near every fighter on the card. After that is the UFC 226 press conference. After that is the Ultimate Fighter 27 finale ceremonial weigh-ins. After that is the UFC Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And then after that, we've got to sit down and record the podcast, the MMA Roadshow. So, I mean, we're talking about, a solid 15, 16, 17 hours straight of work.
Jesus.
So, yeah, it's crazy. I know you guys have been through it, man. International Fight Week is nuts. I will say, thank God we're down to 2 events a week. They had 3 events in a week. A couple years, and it was crazy because you'd be doing like weigh-ins for one show, media day for another show, and then the actual fights themselves. I mean, it was just crazy. So it's a blast. If you're a fan and you want to come out and just hang out and enjoy International Fight Week, man, there's signings and autographs, and there's so many people available around. There's so much stuff to do. It's really cool. As a journalist, it's really cool. It's just really busy.
Yeah.
And you,
I was just gonna say, like, I remember, like, there was that UFC 200 fight week. There was like weigh-ins going on, and then we were trying to upload video, and that was in T-Mobile Arena. Meanwhile, at the MGM Grand, at the same time, fights were already starting for like a fight night, and we were missing those fights. It was insane. Catching cabs, like you're in an arena, you come out, it's the desert here, you're back in another arena. It was insane.
It was unbelievable. You mentioned the Hall of Fame ceremony. Before we get to the fights, John, obviously Ronda Rousey, a big name on there. What are you sort of anticipating in terms of the attendance for that, and I suppose the size of that? Because, I mean, Ronda's a big star. I mean, a lot of new fans of the WWE now. Are you expecting this to be a really big deal? Because me and Casper, we've been to some of these ceremonies before. We're not saying they're not a big deal, but the one that we were to, obviously, media couldn't record at. The attendance was good, but it wasn't thousands and thousands of people. What are they sort of setting up for this Ronda Rousey one?
So they're doing something different this year, so I'm pretty excited for this. It's at the Pearl, first of all, the Pearl at the Palms, which is where a lot of stuff is happening. So it's a little bit smaller theater. They used to do UFC shows there a long time ago, and then basically the owner of the hotel and Dana had a little bit of a falling out, so they stopped doing shows there. Now the Fertittas bought the property, and so they're doing stuff again. But it holds about 1,000 people in there. But what they did this year is they actually sold tickets. Here's what some of the guys behind the scenes of the Hall of Fame told me is before, they used to have it where you had to have tickets, but you just gave them away. But then some people that want to go didn't get them, and then you know how it is when you get something that's free and you're like, oh, well, I changed my mind, we're not going. So what they did this year was they sold tickets for $20, but all of that money that they sell, all the revenue goes to a local charity. So that way, people do have a financial investment in it. I think they actually said last year they went on like ticket reselling sites, and even though the tickets were free, like ticket resellers had like hundreds of them, up on there, like trying to make money off of it. So they tried to fix all that. So anyway, expecting about 1,000 people. I was told it's almost sold out. And again, people did have to buy tickets. That money's all going to charity. So I think it'll be a pretty cool scene. The Palms is a really cool venue. It's really small, really intimate. The Ronda Rousey thing I'm interested in because, I filmed, if you guys have seen like the Hall of Fame announcements, I filmed like some of the like little announcement things where they talk to like certain media, like me, Brett Okamoto, Adam Hill, some of those. So we knew who was getting into the Hall of Fame early, but of course we had to agree not to report it. But Ronda Rousey going in, I'm like, oh, we got to take advantage. It's like, guys, we know it's coming. So let's just make a little video. I mean, obviously, video is one of the ways, is you guys know, that we generate revenue, So I was like, we got to have a little video because, man, as soon as she gets announced to the Hall of Fame, like that's going to be like huge traffic. And if we have a video in there that makes sense, we're good to go. I mean, we didn't do anything crazy elaborate over the top, but we had something. But when the announcement was made, I won't say crickets, but I do feel like a big portion of the MMA population is kind of soured on her maybe and wasn't. So it wasn't a heavily trafficked post the way I thought it would be. But I am interested. You are right. You guys pointed out something. We're not allowed to film it. It will stream on UFC Fight Pass, and of course they'll archive it as well. But they're trying to protect their program basically. So we're allowed in. I think we're allowed to record it, but we can only use like up to 30 seconds. There's like all these different
crazy.
It's crazy restrictions. But I am interested. I am interested to hear.
Curious what she'll say as well.
That's it. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested. Will she finally address everything? Is it just going to come in and be something generic? I mean, some of the speeches have been fun. I mean, this thing keeps getting bigger. Kind of like the MMA Awards. It's kind of developing over time and getting bigger and better every year. I was told that they spent a little bit more time talking to the people this year about their speeches and what they planned on doing. So I don't know what Ronda has planned to say, but I'm interested to hear, will she kind of own up to everything a little bit, which she hasn't done? Will she scrum? I'm kind of guessing not. A lot of the times, they'll stay afterwards, and the media gets to talk to the fighters afterwards. I'm guessing she won't. I'm guessing she doesn't, still won't, keep up her media ban, so to speak. So I'm intrigued because, I think Ronda really deserves in the Hall of Fame. I no question about it. I mean, Dana has said it. We would not have women's MMA if it weren't for Ronda Rousey. She was the catalyst. She was the spark. And I mean, look at how many women are on the roster now, how many divisions there are, how big of a part of the game it is. So for nothing else, if nothing else, she deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for that. So she absolutely deserves it. But, the way she went out, not talking to the media over the last, 2 years of her career, whatever it was, I think that soured a lot of people. And she doesn't owe us anything, but it would be interesting to finally have her kind of, talk about everything and address it. And, I am intrigued to see what her speech will be and if she'll talk to the media afterwards.
And I wonder if she can turn things around, because if she does sort of do a bit of a 180 and sort of address, because she didn't really address the fans all that much. So if she does address the fans, that's going to make news. And I wonder if she can kind of, endear herself to the MMA fans once again, or if she even really cares about that. But
yeah, I mean, I would love for her to come out and just say, man, November, in Melbourne, it was the worst night of my life, and I mean, admit it, just be proud. I remember thinking that night that it was a mistake for her not to come to the press conference. And I know that, they had concussion concerns and all that, but come on, I mean, how many knocked out fighters have we put up there on the dais? I would have loved her to at least show up to the press conference and just be like, congratulations to Holly Holm. Tonight was not my night. I'll be back. I'll be champion again. Thank you, I'm gone, read a prepared statement and leave. Even something like that, you know what I mean? Yeah. But just to avoid this, and then the whole thing before the Nunes fight where no media at all, no nothing. It's like, I mean, again, nobody owes us anything. There's no obligation, I guess, doing that stuff. But I feel it was a bad way to handle things. And it would be cool for her to come out and address some of that. And as you said, try to turn around. I mean, she seemed to be making fans in wrestling. I'll be honest, I don't follow the WWE. So, I've seen the little clips here and there. But it seems like people are impressed with her in WWE. And she seems happy. So maybe she's got a new life and doesn't even really care about it anymore. Who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting because I watched a few of her matches and she's actually doing really, really well. But the funny thing is she kind of roughly, loosely addressed a bunch of stuff for the WWE. And to me, I'm like, you're addressing it for the WWE. Obviously, you have the relationship with them, but it would be nice for you to address it with the people where it all started, which is the MMA people. So it kind of goes full circle. So it'll be interesting. There was a funny story, actually, where an Australian media member, I think for Channel 7, a big channel here, flew all the way to America to interview her, and then she wouldn't answer any of his questions. That was pretty
that was like
wild.
an EA Sports thing, right?
Yeah. So they put it up on the news and complained. And she's coming down here in October, so who knows? Maybe me and Cass will get a chance to put on WWE hats and then take them off and be like, we're MMA media. And answer our questions. But
gotcha. That'd be great, man.
You'll probably see us and won't do it. Let's talk about the fights, because I know you got a lot of pre-drinking coming up. Big weekend in Vegas. We just mentioned it. We want to start with a tough finale. A guy that we all know very, very well, Israel Adesanya, takes on Brad Tavares. Tell us, what are you expecting here? Because I guess a lot of people soured a little bit on Adesanya with his last performance. People thought he was going to just go in there and sort of dominate and take a victory out early. But at the same time, you're looking at a guy like Tavares, who is a veteran. He's super dangerous. And you could argue another huge test for Adesanya. Do you think this is something that Adesanya can win? Do you think it's a little bit too much too soon for him? How do you think this kind of plays out?
It's definitely a winnable fight. I mean, Adesanya is talented. I wasn't as critical of his last performance, I guess, as a lot of people were. But I think the expectations were just, like, unrealistic. The guy's just going to come in and, like, leaping spin kick knock out everybody in the first 12 seconds or whatever. I mean, the guy is incredibly talented, and I think he's going to continue to improve as a mixed martial artist. I do think this is a tough test. I know Brad Tavares isn't probably the most popular, the biggest, sexiest name out there. You know what I mean? He's been grinding. He's one of those blue chip guys who's just been doing it forever. I've watched his whole career out here in Las Vegas, so I'm kind of partial to the guy. Listen, I don't want to say this is too big of a test for Israel, but I'm actually picking Brad Tavares in this fight. And one of the things I think is really interesting that, don't forget about when you're breaking down this fight is this fight will be at the Palms, and that means the small cage. And I think Israel Adesanya, he's got to have range, right? I mean, the striking he does, he works best with range and movement and working from distance. Brad Tavares, I mean, he's going to want to clinch, right? I mean, he's going to want to try to take this fight down if he can. Anybody that was going to fight Adesanya, I mean, it wouldn't be a good game plan to be like, I'm just going to stand in the pocket and outstrike this guy. Like, I mean, come on. It's wrestling and grinding is going to be some part of your game plan. So to do it in that smaller cage with, there's a lot less distance, a lot less room to maneuver. I think that could prove problematic for Adesanya in this fight.
That's a really, really good point. I haven't seen that one brought up before. I was going to say he's also targeting the winner of Hall and Costa. We're also fighting that weekend. What do you think about that? If he does win, if he does beat Brad Tavares, do you like him potentially fighting the winner of those guys?
I like it because those guys are names that stylistically match up really well. I think those would both be fun fights, and I think it allows Adesanya to keep taking intriguing fights that matter, but not moving all the way up. I don't think he's ready to challenge the elite of that division just yet. I mean, there's some monsters up there at the very top. So I do like that. I think either one of those guys would be a fun match. Hell, win or lose. I mean, those fights are going to. That's what's great about Adesanya. Is going to be fun no matter what, right? I mean, if the guy's challenging for a title or not, he's great at interviews. His fighting style is entertaining, and I think you can match him up with those guys, win or lose. To be honest with you.
And just speaking of the tough finale, I mean, it kind of looks like this is going to be the last season of Tough, unless you know something that we don't, John. But one more. Okay, there's going to be one more. Obviously, yeah, that's right. The featherweight one. But once that's all said and done, where are you at in terms of the Ultimate Fighter and sort of its place in combat sports today? Because I remember back in the day, this is before me and Casper even got into the MMA media scene, the Ultimate Fighter was a really, really big part of what the UFC had to offer. A lot of new fans came through there. A lot of new personalities and fighters came through there, and there was some really, really memorable seasons. And now, I'm not saying that the Stipe DC season wasn't great, because there was definitely some interesting stuff that happened, but not as many people watch it. Not as many people care about the fighters that come from it. And a lot of fighters that come from the Ultimate Fighter these days, people don't really even know they're from the Ultimate Fighter, and they don't really have long-lasting careers like the old ones. So where are you at in terms of that one more season of the Ultimate Fighter? Do you think it's time for the show to come to an end?
I do. I think it's time for the show to come to an end. It's funny, though, especially in the media, of course, you see this almost like hatred towards the Ultimate Fighter. Like, get this crap off. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, it's definitely, look, it's time for the show to end. I mean, how many TV shows of any kind run 27 seasons, man? You know what I mean? Like, that's an accomplishment in itself. And the Ultimate Fighter absolutely has a meaningful place in history. I mean, of course, starting with The Ultimate Fighter won. I mean, Griffin and Bonner, what an incredible fight that was. Yeah. And I mean, even to this day, all those years later, I can remember, watching that fight on TV and the emotion that it brought to me. And it was just so cool. I mean, this was our sport, on live TV. And I mean, it was just cool, man. I really loved it. And this, just over time, it's evolved. You got to remember those early days, we didn't have 40 UFC events a year. So it wasn't like there was weekly UFC. So how did we get weekly UFC? We got the Ultimate Fighter, and that was kind of our little dose to keep us going. But now we've got fight cards every week, and we've got multiple promotions. It's funny. Some nights, you got Dana White's Contender Series on Tuesday. You got PFL on Thursday. You got Access TV fights on Friday, or Bellator on Friday, and then a UFC on Saturday. I mean, you got all these fights, which I'm not one of those guys that says it's too much fights. Give me all the damn fights I can get. But it's left the Ultimate Fighter is kind of unnecessary. I mean, we've seen it play out. We know what's going to happen. There's, we know how the house life goes. It's not like in the beginning, I think we felt like we were getting some behind the scenes, like, oh, wow, we get to see what these guys are like outside of it. We don't need that anymore. And on top of that, we've got Dana White's Contender Series now, which is phenomenal. You know what I mean? I think that takes the place of this. And, I mean, who doesn't love that product, man? It's 5 fights in 2 hours. Everybody's vying for a UFC contract. So instead of, locking guys in a house for 8 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever. Man, listen, it's served its course. It's time to put it away. I did really like the live season. I thought that was cool. But
not the live season, John. Come on.
I loved the live season.
Not the live season.
Well, the house drama. I mean, the house drama is. I mean, who cares anymore? But at least the fights were live. You know what I mean? That's what I thought was good about it. It wasn't tape-delayed fights that are 3 months old. But it also meant you were keeping people in the house for like 15 weeks or something like that. So, yeah, look, the show has run its course, and I think it's time to put it out the pasture. But listen, I mean, I still have respect for what the show accomplished, what it did for the sport, what it did for a lot of the fighters in it. And, yeah, I mean, it was a good run.
That was good. And there was a lot of memorable seasons as well. Season 10, Rampage Rashad, that was a really good one. And Season 8, where there was some jizz sushi eaten. Who could forget that? And also some great fights as well. But
I was gonna say, here's what's funny though. This is what I always wonder. It's kind of silly, but I do always wonder about, like, the Ultimate Fighter gym is really just like in this warehouse. Like you would never know it driving up on it, except for it has some UFC branding on the outside of it. Like when they get done with the show, I mean, there's literally no reason to keep this crappy old, like, where it's like in a ghetto area. But there's so much history in it, man. There's so much MMA history to just be like, well, we'll just pack up the cage and pack up everything. And, how many doors have been destroyed inside the Ultimate Fighter gym? I mean, you can't just leave those there. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that space. Because I always thought it would be cool to, like, put a physical UFC Hall of Fame there if they, quit doing the show. But, again, it's in kind of a crappy area, so I don't think people would want to venture over there.
Wow, yeah, that's it should be heritage listed. No one should be able to touch that building. Let's talk about UFC. Let's talk about UFC 226 as a card, because obviously there's some amazing matchups. But if you compare this card to UFC 225, which was also amazing from top to bottom, which card do you think is better?
25 was better top to bottom. It was. There's no question about it. I mean, that fight, every fight on it, it's had some meaning to it. There's a couple fights here. I mean, every fight in the UFC has meaning, of course, but there's a couple that I'm not quite as pumped up as I was for UFC 225. But with that said, I think this card is bigger overall. You know what I mean? With Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier, I mean, that is the true definition of a super fight. I mean, the light heavyweight champ moving up to try to win the heavyweight title from the heavyweight champ. I mean, you don't see stuff like that every day, and that's like historical stuff, right? And then Max Holloway and Brian Ortega, like, come on, like if you don't like that fight, you're not an MMA fan, okay? Like, stop. That's amazing. And then you got some other great matchups. I mean, obviously Derrick Lewis, Ngannou, Chiesa. I mean, there's some great fights. So I feel like as a whole, the quality of 225 was a little bit better, but I feel like this card is definitely bigger.
What do you make of Paul Felder's situation? Because he's getting the raw end of the stick here, having to fight one weight class up against Mike Perry. I mean, the guy has to make a living. He seems like at this point, they're throwing him someone, and yes, he gets to fight, but it's certainly not under optimal conditions. And do you think the UFC are maybe not really appreciating him enough, given that he does do an amazing job as a commentator, and he's sort of being a bit of a good sport with UFC 223 now, this situation?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, why does this keep happening to Paul Felder? I mean, here's a dude that does commentary for you, does a fantastic job at it. You know, I find it very, very unfortunate, man. I hate that things worked out. I mean, I still like the fight. Not that Yancy Medeiros Mike Perry wasn't going to be great, but Felder Perry I think is just as good. And you know, at least Paul doesn't have to go through the weight cut now, so I mean, he doesn't have to deal with that issue. And Mike Perry, while not a small guy by any stretch of the imagination, isn't just like the most massive guy for the division you've ever seen. So you know, I don't think it puts Paul Felder in like a horribly bad predicament or whatever to have to take this fight. But it is weird, man, that he keeps continuing to get the short end of the stick when he seems like, you know, pretty much a company guy. But I do like the fight. Not gonna lie, I do like the fight. I just wish things hadn't played out the way they did. And you know, I don't understand. I'll be honest with you, I don't understand that whole situation.
And I mean, just looking at the fight, are you picking Felder here, or do you think Mike Perry might get this sort of upset? And also, if Felder does win, what does it ultimately do for him in the lightweight division?
I haven't done an official pick for this yet. We normally pick the main card for MMA Junkie, but just thinking about it now in my head, yeah, I'd probably pick Paul Felder, to be honest with you. And I think this is one of those ones that, you know, it's not like it earns you a title shot, but I mean, I do think if you win over Mike Perry, and yes, it's not your normal weight class, like I think you get credit in your weight class for doing that. You know, it's not like you said, I can't make 155 anymore, so please put me at 170 or anything. I mean, he's doing the company a favor. So I think even though this isn't a lightweight fight, I think it absolutely improves his positioning in the lightweight division if he wins.
There's also some really good fights at the start of the card. You got Dan Hooker taking on Gilbert Burns. Hooker's obviously a guy that's really well known down here in this part of the world, but still finding his footing overseas, which is kind of why we like to see him, you know, in this spot fighting over there in Vegas. You know, he could arguably have had a high-profile fight here, but do you think he does get it done and get through Burns?
That's a tough fight. You know, you guys know, man, I'm a Dan Hooker fan too, dude. Every time I come down there, you know, I make sure and talk to the Hangman. I love his fighting style. I love his attitude. Dude can break down fights. You know what I mean? Like, I like him. Gilbert Burns is no joke. Dude has incredible jiu-jitsu and can bang as well. So, tough test. I think Hooker has what it takes. I do think he's kind of criminally underrated and underappreciated here in the United States. Maybe this will be a breakout opportunity for him. You know, we'll see. I would lean towards Dan Hooker. He has a great chance in this fight, but do not overlook Gilbert Burns for 1 second. That is a tough dude.
Yeah, he was talking to us last week, and he's calling for a first-round Gogo-Plata finish down Hooker. So keep an eye open for that one. I mean, look, it probably won't come that way. But if he does win this one, it creates a nice little streak for him. He beat guys like Pearson, Jim Miller. If he does win here, do you anticipate the UFC sort of taking advantage of this and maybe putting him in a co-main spot back down here and sort of getting behind him a little bit more? Because this is a guy, like you mentioned, who can analyze fights, break down fights. He's a very, very interesting personality. And he's kind of not the expected trash talker that we've come to see from a lot of other fighters. He's more of an honest kind of Kiwi, modest bloke that's not afraid to speak his mind, but doesn't really go over the top and make it seem a bit cliche or lame.
I like the guy. He's super clever, man. And I think I would hope so. You know, I'd hope, you know, remember, I mean, you know, he came in and fought some tough people. You know, he had some good fights, but he wasn't getting results, right? I mean, it was kind of up and down, right? Now he's on a roll, you know, and this would be a big win for him. This put him on a 4-fight win streak. I mean, that's not easy. So yeah, I think you'd love to see. I mean, I think you guys are what, getting another fight night in November or something like down there in that market. Yeah. So I mean, why not? You know, why not put him in a feature slot there? I think that would make sense. And you know, those are the ones that, fortunately, with the time change and the way you guys hold events, I mean, those still air at a normal time here. You know, where it's like putting them on like a featured, you know, bout in like Singapore or whatever. No offense, I mean, I love Singapore, but the truth is those just get watched less because they're on in the middle of the night. You know, so you know, I think a featured slot, like you said, like a co-main on a fight night in Australia would make a lot of sense.
I think that'd be great. You also got Chiesa and Pettis. You know, before it fell apart at UFC 223, we did speak about that with you. You gave us a bit of prediction, but ultimately, what's your gauge here on this fight? You know, does the extra time to train and focus on this fight change who you're leaning towards at all?
I lean towards Chiesa here, man. It's not an easy pick, man. Anthony Pettis is a tough read because when he's on, man. He's as dangerous as they come. But it seems like he's a guy that, you know, kind of has some off nights along the way as well. Chiesa's going to be the bigger man. There's no question about it. I'm leaning towards Chiesa in this one. I think this is a very, very important fight for Anthony Pettis. I actually talked to Anthony. He was a guest fighter in Chicago up at UFC 225 and talked to him for a little bit. And he said, He said, listen, dude, I'm in a good place right now. He's like, my mind, I went through a lot of things that people don't know about, some personal issues. He's like, I've got those all handled. He's like, I feel like my mind's in a good place right now. And again, when Anthony Pettis is on, he's on. But, I lean towards Chiesa right now. I think he's the right pick.
Another thing that people are excited about, of course, is Gokhan Saki being on the card. Somewhat of a developing guy, a little bit of a dark horse in the division. There are big expectations here, obviously, because of his K1 background. Already got that really, really fun UFC debut, and how that guy took that many shots is still beyond me. But he's got a very favorable matchup here. Are you expecting another clip added to the highlight reel here?
Could be. Listen, Khalil Roundtree, I'm a big fan of, man. He's a Vegas guy. I actually called a couple of his fights as an amateur.
Oh,
and
nice.
I mean, you could see it even in his tough enough days. It's like, oh my God, this guy has potential. But, he's had some setbacks as well. These are two big, strong guys, dude. It's going to be fun. Saki is fun, man. He's one of those guys that, I don't think Gokhan Saki is ever going to be a UFC world champion, but sign me up for his fights all day long, I think Khalil is going to want to try to get this fight to the ground. I think you're going to want to trade with Gokhan Saki. It's a dangerous fight. I lean towards Saki, but I would say don't write off Khalil Roundtree, man. He's a big, strong, dangerous dude as well.
Nice mustache too. That always adds something to the matchup. Should be in the little points that pop up when they walk to the octagon, even though they can clearly see it. Has nice mustache. Let's talk about another potential highlight reel finish that might go down on the card. We're, of course, talking about Ngannou versus Lewis. People have kind of gone off Francis a little bit since his fight with Stipe. And I guess Lewis won't really be the kind of guy that's really going to focus on the holes that Stipe uncovered in that Francis fight with the grappling and the wrestling. How do you sort of anticipate this fight playing out? And if you're Lewis here, what kind of approach are you taking? Or do you just walk in there and see who drops first?
Yeah, man. I love this fight. I mean, how do you not? I mean, this is two big, strong heavyweights are throwing down, right? I love the fight. I'm glad it's happening now. I remember both of them were on a card together in Croatia, and they both won that night, and they're both up on the dais. And I remember already people were like, let's put them against each other. And it was both their, first, second fight. And I was like, no, not yet. Let them have some path. Ngannou had his way up to the top. So I love that it's happening now. I really do. You're right. I think people have soured on Ngannou as well, man. I think they turned off of him because of that last performance. I think that's a mistake, man. I think that was one of those kind of lesson fights for Ngannou. I mean, he came from not even knowing anything about the sport to the heavyweight title in such a short time. I think that was a big lesson for him. And man, he's been putting in the work here in Vegas. I think everybody kind of cracked on him for only training at the Performance Institute the first time around. Now he's at Syndicate, he's at Extreme Couture. I mean, he's working with different coaches, I think he's doing the things to improve. I'm a huge Derrick Lewis fan, man. The Black Beast is a fun fighter to watch. He's kind of a throwback, just go in there and drop bombs and see what happens. He's also a funny dude, you know what I mean? He's got a great personality. I love Derrick Lewis. I think this is a tough matchup for him, man. I think Francis Ngannou hits just as hard as he does, has as good a chin as he does, but it's faster. It's a little bit faster, and I think that quickness could be the difference in this fight. That said, I mean, Derrick Lewis, I don't think the wise decision would be, just go in there and trade in the pocket and see what happens, because I think Ngannou does have a little bit more quickness in situations like that. I think the play for me, if I was, trying to coach Lewis, is yes, put this thing in the clinch, strike from there, try to get the takedown and finish this fight on the floor, because I think Ngannou will have made improvements, but I don't know if he can necessarily get up off of his back if Derrick Lewis is on top throwing big punches.
It's a good point. We saw, I guess for Lewis, it's going to be really hard because even Stipe, who is a very, very good wrestler at times, had trouble taking Ngannou down. So it's a bit of a tough matchup for him. Just quickly, before we get off Lewis, you guys are really close. Where is he at mentally going to this one? Because, he wanted to retire at one point. He had a really, really, really bad back. What's his motivation here? And do you know how decent shape his body is in going into this one?
Sounds like he's a lot better, man. Talking to the people around him, it sounds like he's in a hell of a lot better place. The retirement was more about exhaustion, man. Remember he had a really busy schedule. He fought a lot of fights, and that's taxing on you. It's taxing on your relationships. It's taxing on everything around you. You have to be a little bit selfish during training camps. I think he was just kind of burned out. The back thing scared me. I remember, fighting in New Zealand. I remember him having to stop and lean on the octagon for a bit before he walked back to the back because his back was hurting him so bad. I'm told that, they've been able to rehab that. They've been able to work on some conditioning and things like that. And that injury is in a lot better place. So I do think he's in a good spot. I think we're going to get 100% Derrick Lewis, which is what makes this fight even more fun and more dangerous. I think he's in a good spot. I still think it's a tough assignment, but I think we're going to get 100% Derrick Lewis.
Let's talk about one of the most exciting fights on the card. I mean, so many exciting fights. This will be an exciting fight, but this one, Holloway versus Ortega, you mentioned it before. You're not a fight fan if you're not looking forward to this one. Both guys are seemingly in their prime of their career here, John, and it looks like it could go either way. When you break this one down, who do you sort of lean towards here?
It's so hard, right? I mean, because we've seen what Brian Ortega is capable of doing. I mean, his grappling is on another level, right? I mean, if he gets a hold of you, that's lights out, you know. But Max Holloway, man, the finishes of Jose Aldo, say what you will about Aldo, but like, I mean, when you go out there and just crush him the way he did, like it's impressive stuff. And Holloway just seems to keep getting better and better every single time we see him. And man, these two young guys, I mean, these guys could be facing off for years to come. It's so talented, man. I'm impressed. The thing about Ortega is, he's never out of it, right? I mean, we've seen all those third-round finishes he had. A lot of them he was behind. He was having some issues in those fights. It's not like he hasn't been tested. But he's also given away rounds. You know what I mean? He's lost rounds before he gets that finish. And I feel like, Max is long enough and range enough and smart enough to stay away and not to give up his neck to Brian Ortega. But he's got to be cautious, man. You get in a scramble, and all of a sudden, T-City is all over you. I'm leaning towards Max Holloway in this fight. I'm so impressed by Max Holloway, but I mean, the undefeated Brian Ortega who finds a way to win every single time out. Dude, I cannot begin to tell you how hyped I am for this fight. And I love that these are two, not only young, talented guys, but classy dudes as well. This isn't a fight of like F you, it's just two classy, positive, amazing dudes that are incredible martial artists that are at the best of their game, that are going to go get it on. Yeah, I'm leaning towards Holloway. Just what I've seen him doing there is amazing. But damn, Ortega is so good, and he's never out of a fight. So I'm thrilled. I'm changing my pick. This card's better than 225.
I love it. I was going to say, on that sort of, you mentioned how it's all about respect. I love that the main event and the co-main event are both, in that same breath, that, there's no bad blood. It's just respectful guys. By the way, the promo, the full length, like 4-minute trailer or whatever for this event is just amazing. When they blend from like, the cinematic stuff to the actual in-fight sequences is just amazing. But I was going to say, Max Holloway, he's in an interesting position here. If he beats Ortega, and by the way, I'm picking Max to win this one. Obviously, we got Khabib and McGregor, on the cards, on the horizon at least. I know Max has sort of been about not chasing McGregor or chasing anyone for that matter, but do you think maybe, when the adrenaline's pumping, he gets a big win, he throws his name in the mix, especially if, his lightweight return is potentially impending with the athletic commissions and the weight cuts, etc.?
I was going to say, that's a really good question, because especially since there's still kind of a question mark around Conor McGregor. I do think Conor, in a couple weeks when he goes to court, I think he's getting probation. I think that's all it's going to boil down to. I also believe that the UFC, who, wants to book the biggest fights possible, will probably just say, well, Conor McGregor, he did what he had to do for the legal system. He's paid his dues, and now let's get him back to the fight. I think we're going to see Conor fight Khabib later this year. But as of right now, there are question marks around it. It wouldn't be a bad idea for Max Holloway to throw his name out there, and maybe not so directly, but maybe just drop a hint, because, that's what do we do as media? Congratulations on your win tonight. What's next?
Yeah.
We don't even let him enjoy it, right? But to not maybe rule out any other possibilities, but to maybe drop a hint, like, I've got some unfinished business with a certain guy that's at lightweight right now. Maybe I need to make a move up and see, it's just something like that. So at least the possibility's there, because, listen, I think Khabib is a really bad matchup for Conor McGregor. And Conor's a fantastic fighter, so you don't rule him out of any fight. But I think Khabib is by far the worst matchup for him. And then you add in the fact that how long has it been since Conor McGregor's had an MMA fight? Is the timing going to be there? Is everybody so? I think if you're Conor, you got to have options like, what do you do if you lose? You know what I mean? Of course, the Nate Diaz trilogy, that's always there. I think Conor could lose 5 fights in a row and you could still book the trilogy with Nate Diaz and it'd do well. But a rematch with Max Holloway, that would do well as well. You've got the history there. And I think, Max's star has never been bigger than it is right now. It'd be shining even brighter if he beats Brian Ortega. So I don't think Max needs to go out there and call out Conor McGregor, because I think Max is doing pretty well on his own, and he should be proud of what he's accomplished. I don't think he needs to tie himself to Conor McGregor, but dropping a little hint so that it's at least a possibility sure wouldn't be a bad idea.
It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting if they do fight Holloway and McGregor if McGregor sort of looks at doing that one at lightweight, not wanting to get back down to featherweight, or if it happens at featherweight, it'd be very, very interesting. Let's talk about the big main event because, you know, it's billed as a super fight. A lot of people are really excited to see what DC can do against Stipe Miocic. A lot of people leaning towards Stipe here, John. Obviously, fantastic footwork. There's a great size difference, and Stipe has been able to impress in his last few title defenses. He's had an incredible career. But, of course, you can't forget the DC has that incredible mental strength when he goes to his fights. He has that strong wrestling, and this is a guy that always gets better, even though he's much older than Stipe, 39 years old. Tell us, who are you leaning towards in this fight? Do you have a bit of a prediction that's going to shock everyone, or are you going with the Stipe here?
Man, I tell you what, I am leaning towards Stipe as well. I feel like in my heart, like I want Cormier to win for some reason. It's nothing against Stipe, but I don't know. Cormier is just such a nice dude, and we know he's like towards the tail end of his career, and the history that it would mean, and you know what that would do for a possible Jon Jones fight if he, you know, can ever get everything sorted out with USADA. I don't know. There's so for a lot of reasons, like I want Daniel Cormier to win. But my gut tells me that this is Stipe's fight. You know, you said a lot of things I think are important. You know, the footwork is going to be important because Cormier is going to be relentless, right? He's going to come at you. You know, I do think that, you know, the size and the power, not a huge factor to me. I mean, we know what Cormier's done at heavyweight, right? And it's not like he just fought a bunch of chumps at heavyweight. You know, he fought some names as well. And he's obviously never lost at heavyweight. So, you know, I don't think that's going to be the difference. But I do think, you know, you look at like the straight punches of Stipe, man. I mean, versus kind of the looping stuff that Cormier tends to throw. I do think, as you said, the footwork. I mean, Stipe's shown an ability to evade, you know, advances like that. And I think he's going to have to here. He's probably going to get tied up in the clinch a little bit. But I don't see Cormier knocking Stipe out. So if Cormier is going to win, I think it'd have to be like a relentless 25-minute grind, which he's certainly capable of doing. But I just don't know that he's capable of taking Stipe down enough times and holding Stipe down long enough to get those points and to win the decision. So to me, I'm leaning Stipe in this fight.
And the man in the shadows, the man up in the rafters, the Brock Lesnar. Just quickly on that, do you anticipate we learn anything more about this after this fight gets said and done? Does he get presented? Does he get announced? Does Dana White speak about him a bit more? And do you actually anticipate that he fights the winner of this fight?
I do think he's going to fight the winner of this fight. I don't think we'll get any official word. I think, from my understanding, again, I'm not super tied into the wrestling world, but I understand. I think he's still got some commitments to work out there at WWE. So I don't think we'll hear about it. I think we'll hear about it because journalists like myself will certainly ask about it. We like them clicks on MMAJunkie.com, and whatever people want to say about Brock Lesnar, they click on the damn stories. So, look, I do think it's a fight. It's weird, man. I mean, I think Brock. Unless Brock comes back and fights Jon Jones, which is a possibility as well. But I think we could see that fight happen. I don't believe, and I could be wrong, I don't believe we'll get any kind of official announcement, or maybe even, maybe Dana might speculate a little bit, but I don't think he can do anything while Brock's still under contract.
Fantastic. Well, look, it's an exciting time. Best of luck for the awards, John. Sorry for taking away from the pre-drink time, but of course, we love having you on the program. Guys, make sure to check out the coverage for UFC 226, the finale, and of course, the Hall of Fame ceremony on MMAJunkie.com. And listen to him and Cold Coffee break down the event on the MMA Roadshow. Of course, a fantastic podcast, a fantastic program. A lot of backstage insight from both guys. A great chemistry between you guys. We really enjoyed having Cold Coffee on the show last time. Where is he, John? Where is he? It's all good. It's all good.
He won't put a suit on. He doesn't want to go tonight. He's
not going to the awards.
Wow.
No, but check this out. There is a community involvement event where Miss Universe is putting on as part of a self-defense seminar for women, and that's where Cold Coffee will be this evening with Miss Universe, hanging out with Miss Universe.
I see Cold Coffee in like a Big Mama's house situation, dressed as a woman. Possibly a test dummy for Miss Universe to show off some moves and demonstrate how they work. So, guys, make sure to check out John on Twitter at MMA Junkie. John, thank you so much for jumping on with us. Love the house, love the posters, and best of luck today at the awards.
Thanks, guys.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is easily one of the best analysts in the sport, a former UFC title challenger. You can catch him on commentary and breaking down fights with his great insight. Here to help us preview UFC 226, the one and only Dan Hardy, who has Submission Radio set as one of his alarms and has had a bit of a rough night tonight. We appreciate you joining us, Dan. How's everything going? How's your wife feeling? We know she wasn't feeling too well earlier on.
Yeah, no, everything's fine now. We're back home now. She was at the gym training, and she's an aerial artist, so she was climbing up on an apparatus, and she finished a trick that she was learning, and unfortunately dislocated her shoulder. So we've just had a little trip to the hospital, but we're back home now, and the arm's back in place, and she's feeling much better. So she'll be healed in no time.
Wow, we really wanted to get that out there just so all the listeners know how good of a sport you are being right now for still managing to jump onto us. We also know that it's very late at night, so really appreciate it. So let's kick it in, man. Looking at UFC 226, obviously the main event, Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier. And looking at DC and going off his recent appearance on Conan O'Brien, he does look noticeably a lot smaller, a lot leaner, and just generally less muscular compared to when he was fighting heavyweight back in the day. Do you think this is by design? Do you think, rather than trying to get big again in a short amount of time, even though this fight has been announced for about 6 months, he's looking to maybe have a speed advantage here against Stipe and, specifically be a bit smaller?
Yeah, potentially. I think a part of it, though, is more down to the amount of time he really spends in the gym now. When we were seeing him as a heavyweight before, he was training all day, every day. He was coaching, he was in the gym all the time, he was working with a lot of heavyweights. And at the same time, he was younger. He was, and also not keeping his weight down for light heavyweight fights. So he was probably just eating healthy, eating a lot, and getting a lot of strength and conditioning work put in. So I would imagine he's naturally a bit smaller now anyway. I'm not sure whether it's necessarily by design. It might pay off. It might pay dividends if he is smaller and able to keep the pace up. But yeah, I think it's more coincidental than anything now. He spends a lot of time away from the gym doing a lot of analyst work. So you've got to think that there's more of a process of getting into shape now than there was before when he was always in the gym.
And when we look at both fighters here, there's obviously a size difference, there's a reach difference, and we've seen DC sort of navigate these waters with Jon Jones, for example. But coming in here against Stipe, how well do you think he'll be able to do, especially with Stipe's footwork? And also, obviously, Stipe will probably have a bit more power than Jon Jones. How much do you think that will affect the fight and sort of deter DC from opening up?
I think it changes it a lot. And I don't think there's... If I was in DC's corner, realistically, I don't think I'd take a lot of confidence from his performances against Gustafsson and Jon Jones. Obviously, there are certain things he does very well against those guys. Head movement, obviously, is one of them. I talked about it on the inside of the octagon, getting inside their reach, getting his head close to their elbow so you know that you're in a safe zone is a much better place. Jon Jones tends to throw elbows only when he's in charge. And Gustafsson didn't throw any elbows at all. So when DC was inside their range, they felt very smothered. The difference here, though, is that Stipe not only enjoys fighting at close range against smaller guys. If you look at his fights against Mark Hunt and Roy Nelson, they were his most close-range fights apart from the Ngannou fight. So you've got to think that he's more comfortable at that range. And the other thing as well, and I've pointed this out a couple of times, and this is the key in this fight, is that Stipe Miocic's power is short range. We don't see him throw really long-range right hands. It just doesn't happen. When he throws his power punch, he knocks people out with it, but it's usually at a very short degree. You've got to think the Andre Arlovski one was probably a 90-degree bend in his arm. The Junior Dos Santos was slightly longer, slightly more of a bend in the arm, but not a great deal. And if you watch him hitting pads as well, there's a drop-off on his right hand. It fires out really powerful to this kind of range and then drops off immediately. So with DC being so good at head movement, but also so good at getting inside a long reach, he's going to be expecting a longer reach from Miocic, which is not going to be there. And the danger zone where he's slipping his head through is exactly where Miocic puts his right hand. So I think he has to change his tactics in this one. If he's going to close that distance quickly and put his, get into a dirty boxing range and wrestle, he's got to be a lot more cautious about his head movement.
And I was going to say, you mentioned the dirty box and wrestle. Obviously, DC's good in the clinch in that dirty box. Does it add more sort of warning signs to when he's exiting those positions as well? Because you mentioned how Stipe doesn't need that distance to throw his strong shots. Do you think there's a possibility that if DC gets careless when he's exiting or entering one of those clinch positions, things could get pretty rough for him?
Absolutely, and the other thing that you'll notice again, go back to the Roy Nelson-Stipe fight, when Roy was trying to find his way out of the clinch is when Stipe is the most aggressive. So a sign of DC exiting the clinch for Miocic, I think automatically is this guy's trying to get away from me, I'm going to put it on him. So that's going to be a massive danger zone for DC. And then, when Miocic is chasing somebody down, his reach does come into play because it closes distance with those punches. His weight follows it, and that's where the power is. But he can certainly touch you at the end of his reach, and that's a good thing to keep someone on the back foot. So, I mean, ultimately, you've got to think that Miocic is probably going to be the one that's trying to maintain some range, but then catch DC as he closes distance. And I think that if DC is going to enter into a clinch, he's got to assume that the only way out of that clinch is if he's striking himself, or if he's exiting with perhaps a lower body attack or a single leg, something like that.
And I guess the interesting thing is when you sort of compare opponents, the closest that DC has come to facing someone like Stipe is maybe an Anthony Johnson. However, Stipe hasn't really faced anyone like DC, or if you look through his record, he hasn't really faced many or any pure wrestlers for that matter. And, given the guys like, Junior Dos Santos, Gabriel Gonzaga, even Joey Beltran many moons ago were able to land takedowns on Stipe. How do you think Stipe will be able to handle DC forward pressure and relentless takedowns if DC is able to get in on him and is able to, say, take him down? And do you think if he does take him down, will DC be able to hold him down for extended periods of time?
Well, I think one thing that I am expecting is that Stipe's takedown defense is going to be much improved. In those early days, even you go back to the Struve fight, he was a bit more reckless. He was a bit more rough around the edges. He's become far more refined in this recent streak that he's put together, especially since he's been the champion. He's more certain and more sure of himself. His confidence is on a high. And he also knows where his strengths and weaknesses are in the fight as well, which I think is important especially for a heavyweight, because you've got to be aware of those danger zones. And he knows what DC brings to the table. Every single one of DC's fights the same because he's only got one way of fighting, and that is close distance, big looping overhand shots into a dirty boxing range, and then he wrestles. And if he can take you down, he'll hold you down, and he'll just beat you up until you quit. We've not seen quit in Miocic, though. And obviously Anthony Johnson twice, he's been able to maul Anthony Johnson and beat him up to the point where he offers a rear naked choke. But we've not seen that from Miocic. And I would be concerned that would be an issue if we'd seen Miocic beat Ngannou in 2 rounds. But we saw him comprehensively beat him for 25 minutes against a very big, dangerous guy. Effectively, a bigger, stronger version of Anthony Johnson. Now, I would struggle to see DC do the same thing to Ngannou that he did to Anthony Johnson, because I think we know that Anthony Johnson, he doesn't like fighting as much as some of these heavyweights. As tough and as big and as strong as he is, you can tell in fights when he's kind of given up a little bit. But Ngannou never quit, not once against Miocic. He kept fighting till the end. But Miocic was able to match that pace against a much bigger man. And the same thing that's always been said in boxing. I know I'm rambling. I'm going to make my final point now.
Oh, no, take your time, man, dude. We love it. This is the best part.
It's late at night. My brain races like this. Yeah. You've got the best on the worst time. My boxing coach always used to say to me, the good big man beats the great little man. And although obviously DC might step on the scales at around 240 and probably match Stipe's weight a little bit, he's still the smaller man. As you said, he's 5'11", Stipe's 6'5". Stipe's got an 8-inch reach advantage, which, although he doesn't use that in the striking range, when it comes to wrestling, when it comes to building frames and posting and, digging underhooks and stuff, those long levers are quite useful. It's a lot of work for DC to hold a man like that down for 25 minutes.
And obviously as well, you mentioned the fact that it's 25 minutes. DC will probably have to lean heavily on his wrestling. We've seen Stipe, he got pretty tight in that Ngannou fight because he was wrestling a really, really big man for quite some time. But who do you anticipate sort of gasses out first in this 25-minute fight? Do you think it'll be Stipe? I mean, do you think it'll be DC because you have to rely so heavily on his wrestling? Or do you think it'll be Stipe if DC is able to get him down and sort of keep him down?
I think they're both going to get tired. I think we're probably going to be going into the 3rd round. I think DC is going to have been pushing Miocic to his limit for 2 rounds. I can see Miocic looking tired at the beginning of the 3rd, and we're going to all sit there and wonder, which one of these is going to pull through. And for me, the one defining factor is the fact that Miocic can knock you out with one punch. You know, DC's always got to close that distance. He's always got to brawl his way into a wrestling match, and he's always got to get you to the floor. Like, we're not seeing him knock people out with one punch, and not since Patrick Cummins. You know what I mean? He's not a big puncher. He's a volume puncher. He breaks your soul instead of your face. And Miocic is the other way around. He'll hit you with one shot, and you won't know what day it is. And I feel like he maintains that power because it seems so effortless for him. I was talking to my friends who build the show with me, the Inside the Octagon show, and John Gooden, obviously. And I was saying, you watch Miocic's fights, and the finish of his fights, it looks like two kids in a schoolyard fighting, and one's finally caught the other one and beaten him, because they're not full power punches. He doesn't wind up. He hits like this. It's like a jackhammer. You know, you watch his fight against Alistair Overeem, where he's got him on the floor. He's literally over him, and he just goes bang, 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 switches him off. And that short range power that we saw him using going backwards against Fabricio Verdum, that we've seen him use going forward so many times, it's obvious that power is pure arm power alone. So that's easy to maintain. It's not an Anthony Johnson punch where you need that big wind up to throw it. You need that. It's a short pop. And every time DC closes that range and starts moving his head across that center line, that danger is going to be there for the full 25 minutes, even if Stipe's tired.
I mean, it's pretty clearly a huge step up for DC and a really, really tall task. If he can pull off the upset and beat Miocic this weekend, where do you think he sits in terms of, you know, the greatest fighters of all time? Because that really is the narrative going into this fight. And also, if he can beat Stipe, a guy who's, you know, finished really, really elite heavyweights within one round, would you consider DC a better heavyweight than a light heavyweight, given obviously the losses to Jon Jones at 205?
You know what? I think if DC wins, I mean, obviously it would be amazing, and he would most definitely be one of the pound-for-pound best of all time, because no one, particularly at the heavier weight classes, has been able to do that, apart from, you know, Randy Couture. And that was in a day where, you know, intelligence could easily win a fight, whereas now everybody's pretty smart and everyone's well conditioned. So, you know, the margins forever are far smaller. So, you know, the more successful people are in the future of this sport, the more impressive it's always going to be, in my opinion. And I think that DC, if he does take a win this weekend, and if he is able to better Miocic, then what I think it does, instead of defining what DC's career is all about, I think it defines what a heavyweight's all about. I mean, the question then is, okay, so we've got DC as a relatively small heavyweight, you know, he's a 5'11" heavyweight that's carrying a bit of extra meat that he doesn't really benefit a great deal from. How does he deal with a real massive heavyweight like Brock Lesnar? And then that question falls into our lap, and that's a question that I would want answered then. Because ultimately, what we're trying to find at heavyweight is the most efficient human being. You know, the heavyweight champion is the baddest man on the planet, and there's a reason for that. It's because we assume the heavyweight champ can beat every other weight class as well. But if the light heavyweight champion steps up and beats heavyweight, then we've got to question whether actually the efficiency of a light heavyweight with a few more pounds on his shoulders, or maybe even just not cutting weight, is actually a better version of a combat athlete than a heavyweight could be.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned Brock Lesnar's name. It seems like he's a little bit in the mix. Obviously, he's still figuring out what's going on with the WWE. We're not sure what's happening. He might be on this pay-per-view called SummerSlam. He might not be. But where do you stand on the fact that he might be the next guy for whoever wins this fight? And would you be interested in seeing a Brock Lesnar-Stipe fight or a Brock Lesnar-DC fight?
Hey, ever since I saw Brock Lesnar running away from Cain Velasquez, I'll watch Brock Lesnar fight, because that tickled me.
I take it you enjoyed that.
To see a guy that's built like a fridge freezer run away from someone just because they were punching him, it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
You know, when we get someone of Brock Lesnar's size that's got DC's mentality, that's when you've got a heavyweight that you can't beat. Unfortunately, although, you know, with all the things that Brock Lesnar brings to the table, the one thing he doesn't have, in my opinion, is a real fighting spirit. You know, he's got fighting spirit as long as he's the big bully man in there. But if you put someone in there that can punch him back, he starts to fall apart at the seams. And I think that's where a matchup with him and DC would be fascinating. I would take him against Miocic as well, but I think Miocic handles him pretty comfortably. But the size discrepancy between him and DC would, for me, make it. I mean, it's old school UFC fascinating. You know, it's pride fighting championships fascinating. I don't mind, because I'm ultimately in this to find out not only what the best martial art is and what the best skill set is for martial arts and combat sports, but also what the ideal physical human being is. You know, for a long time, about Jon Jones, always he's the perfect size and shape for a combat sports athlete, because he's 6'4", he's got an 84-inch reach, which is bigger than Stephen Struve. You know, he's a bit of a freak when it comes to his physiology, but it also his ability to be creative and to put things together. You know, there's still a question out there for that, and then there might still be a Jon Jones fight on the table if DC picks up a win as well. I would still like to see the Gustafsson fight. Obviously, I know that he's got a different opponent coming up, but there are so many interesting matchups for him. And to be honest, the margin between heavyweight and light heavyweight is so narrow anyway that any of those guys can step up. I mean, Volkan Oezdemir, if he picks up a big win, could step into the heavyweight division and start wrecking people. It's an exciting time for the heavy divisions, and I can't think of a time when it's been better.
It's fascinating because you mentioned before how a light heavyweight is stepping up and fighting a heavyweight, and how this kind of figures out who is the most dominant, what's going on in this sort of food chain of fighters. But do you think if we were having the same conversation about Jon Jones fighting Stipe, that we might even be leaning more towards the light heavyweight in Jon Jones than we are to Stipe? Would that almost add to that argument that you're putting together, that a light heavyweight can step up and possibly challenge the baddest man on the planet?
Absolutely. You know, I think the thing that's interesting about Jon Jones for me, obviously, is that he's got a heavyweight frame, but he moves like a middleweight, really, if we're honest. So with him being able to span that distance that a heavyweight can and hit them at the same kind of reach and distance that a big heavyweight can, as well as the fact that he can move very quickly. And you've got to think, I mean, heavyweight power is something to consider. But power comes from the combination of speed and strength, you know what I mean? So if Jon Jones can make up for his deficit in strength, or perceived deficit in strength at heavyweight, with the speed that he's almost definitely going to bring up, I think he hits heavyweights a lot harder than they would be expecting him to. And then, you know, if you take weight cutting off the table, what's Jon Jones's natural weight? I mean, he's probably 220 anyway, 225. He doesn't carry a lot of weight, but I would say just the idea of taking weight cutting off the table is actually going to make him a better fighter. I think we're seeing that across the lighter divisions at the moment. You know, guys stepping up to welterweight and doing well. Guys stepping up from welterweight to middleweight. I mean, the current middleweight champions are former welterweight. You know, the times are changing, and I think that fighters are realizing that being more efficient in their own body, no matter what size that is always going to be a benefit to them over boiling themselves down and cutting. I would say that there's probably quite a few light heavyweights that could step up and probably look better at heavyweight than they do. You know, even Gustafsson. I mean, Gustafsson, if out of training camp, he's a monster. He is an absolute monster. But you boil him down to light heavyweight, and he starts to look a bit more like a schoolboy. And I think it's because he's so tired, so long and tall. But if you see him when he's filled out, when he's at proper size, however he makes 205. I used to start training camp at 205. So when I see Gustafsson walking down the street like a giant Viking, I think to myself, he could rule the heavyweight division if he chose to.
And it's crazy, even like what you mentioned before, controversy aside, to think that Jon Jones could potentially be even better, and if a weight cut is holding him back even a little bit, is just a scary thought. But we got to obviously talk about Max Holloway and Brian Ortega, the other big one. We're talking to John Morgan before about how it's amazing that both fights, the main event and the co-main event, they're just kind of, the whole narrative is built on respect, and something that we love about this one. But looking at how the fight will start, obviously Ortega's striking has steadily been improving. You know, he's usually able to find some really effective counters. Against Maxa, that's obviously a lot easier said than done. What do you make of Ortega's striking? His evolved striking. And if you're him, how would you look to get around Max Holloway's, you know, constant lateral movement and general elusiveness?
Well, first of all, I've been very impressed with Brian Ortega. I've really enjoyed his progress. You know, I mean, the two standout moments for me were the readjusting of the choke against Cub Swanson, and then obviously his knockout of Frankie Edgar. I mean, picture perfect punches, really, really beautiful. You know, delivery, timing, placement, everything was perfect about it. The thing I would say about his striking, and it is developing from one fight to another. And I think that's more down to his confidence than his actual technique. I think his technique was always there. I just think he was a bit questioning of it. But now he's got some proof. I think he's really starting to come out of his shell. We know he's a slow starter. He's a consummate third-round finisher, which bodes well for championship rounds, even though he's not really needed them in the past. So I think that the only danger really for him in this fight is the fact that Max Holloway comes out with a ferocity that is probably unmatched in the featherweight division right now, and the fact that Brian Ortega's boxing is really good once he's found a safe place for his front foot. He likes to kind of work himself into range where he can start doing those nice slick boxing combinations, and his footwork's nice, but at the same time it's all about planting that front foot before he starts to feel out the striking combinations. And Max Holloway, not only with his leg kicks will he eat that leg up, but he's also so good at switching his stance as he's moving in, which makes it difficult for a fighter that likes to set in their way before they start throwing combinations. You've got to be very adaptable when you're fighting someone like Max Holloway, which is why you get like a TJ Dillashaw or Dominic Cruz fight, because they're so fascinating because they're both so adaptable. But if you have one fighter that's more adaptable in the chaos than somebody else, I always tend to see those fighters coming out on top. And Brian Ortega is very good at doing what he does. Max Holloway is very good at dealing with what's in front of him. And that might be the key in this one for him.
Those are some really interesting points, because I was going to say Ortega's forward pressure, obviously, it's always there because he's not afraid to get taken down, and, it can lure fighters into making mistakes. We've seen fighters sort of start panicking when they don't get that breathing room. And, it sort of sets them up for mistakes. Do you think, like you mentioned, Max Holloway sort of potentially chewing up that leg, do you think it won't be as much of a factor as maybe in Ortega's past fights? Or do you think there is any way that maybe it does start to wear on Max sort of in the later rounds?
I think he may potentially, if he has the confidence to keep pushing forward in those first two rounds where Max is at his sharpest and he's cutting angles and throwing 5, 6, 10 strike combinations like he does. You can't cover all of that. Something's going to get through. With boxing gloves and a good kick defense, you can block a lot of stuff. But with MMA gloves, you just can't. And then with the threat of the takedown as well. And we know how effective Brian Ortega is when he gets his hands on someone, no matter where the fight is. So anytime he closes distance, you've got to think Max Holloway is going to be punching his way out and getting as much space as possible, which then forces Brian Ortega to continue marching forward. And if you're an intelligent striker like Max Holloway is, you can eat somebody up as they walk forward. That's where Brian Ortega struggles in this one, in my eyes. If it hits the mat, it can cause all kinds of problems for Max Holloway, because it's very difficult to find someone that can replicate his kind of game. He's got a legitimately serious squeeze. If he gets wrapped on Max's neck at any point, then that's always going to be a danger, and he will jump guard as well. But much like the heavyweight champ, Max Holloway knows exactly where his strengths and weaknesses are. He knows he's incredibly durable, and he keeps that in his back pocket. There are fighters that fight face first. They go, I'm always going to be tougher and more conditioned, so that's my first game plan every time. And they're the guys that fail first, because they just engage here. I don't want to pick on him. I love his fighting style, but that's going to run out. That runs out. Skills don't run out. Intelligence doesn't run out. Timing doesn't run out. Timing changes as you get older, absolutely. Ask Roy Jones about that. But if you're smart and you know how to apply it, you can get away with it for a long, long time. And Max Holloway knows he's got toughness in the back pocket, but he's also a very intelligent fighter. And he knows where to put himself at risk to land good shots. He's the only person that took McGregor to the distance at featherweight as well. And that was a rough fight for him. He got caught with some clean shots in that. And although he didn't adapt to come out on top, he still managed to get to the final belt and did really well. And then, his win streak since has been ridiculous.
And also, you mentioned before the third round finishes. Both guys have a lot of third round finishes. So I'm sort of curious if by the third round, it's going to lean fairly heavily and sort of exponentially become more and more one-sided, because it seems like both guys, they sort of take a little while to figure out their opponent, and then when they do, they just kind of almost run away with it. Ortega sometimes takes a few shots, but then he does eventually get the finish. Any other sort of X factors that you're expecting from him, or anything that you're curious about regarding either fighter? I feel like with Ortega, there's more questions. At this point, are there any more questions that you have for Max Holloway? Anything that you're hoping to learn by the end of this fight?
What do I want to learn?
Sorry to put you on the spot here, Dan.
No, it's a good. I like a good question. It's very rare I have to stop and think about a question. So much nonsense in my head that I can usually empty out of it. To be honest, I just want to see Max Holloway take on a new problem, which is what he's got in front of him. No matter what Brian Ortega presents itself, it's a new problem for him. Everybody that Max Holloway's faced have been people that he's looked up to on his way up. So the people that he's always had in mind, he's like the likes of Frankie Edgar. He's had Frankie Edgar in mind for so long that subconsciously he's built a game plan for that. Now Brian Ortega, although he's been rumbling on the scene for a little while, because of his layoff, because of his injury, and because he's relatively quietly spoken up until this point, he kind of came from nowhere. So there's been no thought process of, okay, he's someone I've got to take into account as well. So I think that's a new problem for Max. I think if he gets tangled up on the floor, he can show us some amazing submission defense. But I think he's smart enough to just know to avoid that entirely. It's Brian Ortega that I need to see. I've got a lot of questions for. I think he's absolutely got the skills, and if not now, then definitely in the future to be a champion. The difference between the two is always in the striking range, though, because that's where it's going to start. And I feel like although Max Holloway, he does take a bit of time to feel people out and assess what their strengths and weaknesses are and find that window of opportunity to get the finish. He does it in a way where he tests them all the time with a lot of strikes, whereas Brian Ortega, he reads them from a distance. You'll see him quite happily walk into range, but he doesn't tease their guard a great deal, whereas Max starts to program from the first round. He starts to set targets up like that wicked body shot that he caught against Pettis, was it? You know what I mean? He started setting that up from the first round. As soon as you start to see that target present itself, you start making mental notes. And I've not seen a lot of evidence of Brian Ortega doing that up until the Frankie Edgar fight. So I think, with someone like Max Holloway in front of him, he's got to think fast. He's got to set traps and lay plans down that may not pay off for 2, 3, 4, maybe even into the 5th round. It's a fascinating fight, and it's far more closely matched than the main event, in my opinion. I think Daniel Cormier's got a real uphill battle, whereas, to be honest, at featherweight, anything can happen with these two guys. I actually wasn't expecting Brian Ortega to beat Frankie Edgar. I thought Frankie was going to grind him out like he did Yair Rodriguez.
Yep.
But, he stepped up on that night, and it was absolutely amazing to see.
Wow, there you go. Dan, I really appreciate your time. We'll let you go in just a moment. Just quickly, I've been wanting to ask you this for a very, very long time, and obviously Luke Thomas kind of beat us to the punch. He asked you about, are you coming out of retirement? You've been teasing this return for quite a long time. It's always sort of been on the cards. Everyone's commenting about, wow, Dan's getting really, really slim these days. He looks like he's training for a fight. And I think you gave, look at that. Look at the chiseled jaw. And I think you gave a really, really good detailed answer as far as, your motivation for wanting to come back. And I think a lot of that makes sense. The one thing that I'm curious about is because you said before about November, MSG, are you still targeting that? Is that something that's still realistic for you? Could we maybe see you potentially fighting again by November this year?
I mean, absolutely it is realistic. To be honest, between us, I'm a bit concerned about the athletic commission over there. I've seen so many issues with them interfering with fighters' weight cuts and stuff. I don't know as I want to add that to my plate if it's my last fight. So I don't know. There's something that feels a bit awkward about that now. To be honest, I'm still feeling it out. I still need to do USADA. So before anything happens, I've got 4 months of that to do. And unfortunately, I am literally in a different place every day at the moment. I mean, it's very rare that I'm at home. So it's difficult for them to pin me down. And unfortunately, it's so laborious to constantly update the app, even if you're in a regular schedule like a training camp. So that's something that I've got to cross. That's a bridge I've got to cross first. But it's within me. Do you know what I mean? I've got it, especially because I felt like I was in motion to a fight, and I don't know whether this is just me. I don't know whether other fighters feel like this, but the start of a training camp is like having an empty bottle, and the closer to the fight you get, the more of a storm builds in that bottle. And if that cork doesn't come off on fight day, that little storm stays in that bottle. And I feel like I've carried around a little storm for 5 years now. And every time I'm sitting octagon side calling these fights, and I'm seeing these amazing wars between two guys that are just pouring their hearts out and giving everything, drawing on every last shred of technique that they've got and advice from coaches. You can really see guys that when they dig deep, I see that and I feel it. and it just stirs that little storm up. It just shakes the bottle. And one day I'm gonna have to take that cork off one more time. And I want it to be the right time and the right place. And I'm in no rush. I've never felt as good as I do now. I move now like I did when I was at Cage Warriors. 10 years ago. My goodness, I'm getting old. 10 years ago. I move like a featherweight when I'm 182 pounds, and this is a great weight for me.
Wow, I'd love to see that storm come out one day. Just quickly, I have heard you say before that it'd have to be the right time, the right offer. What would the right offer look like? Is it a case of, you mentioned that maybe not in New York. Is it more about the location? Would it be a card somewhere local? Would it be more about the opponent? We see people throwing at, hey, maybe a Condit rematch, maybe a Diego Sanchez rematch. What exactly are you looking for in terms of offers?
A known opponent, someone that's not involved in the rankings. I don't want to be interfering with any rankings or anything like that. Because if I come in and beat someone that's within the top 15 in any weight class, then it just starts more questions, and I don't need that, because my job now is as an analyst, and the beauty about not fighting is that I can be completely objective about everybody. And I mean, a part of the process that I would enjoy about fighting again is knowing that I'm so much smarter now. I said this today. I was at the gym today, and I said I wish I knew now what I knew when I was in my career, when I was during my career, because my brain is twice the size now. I'm sure it is. I see so much more, and I know that physically I can do it as well. So I'd like to have the right opponent just to kind of bring that out of me, and that would be someone that's well known, that's not got anything to lose, that is there to show something of themselves instead of to try and further their career, which can change people's motivations in fights.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens there. And Dan, we're looking forward to this weekend. Thank you so much for the preview, guys. Make sure to check out Dan on Twitter and Instagram at Dan Hardy MMA. Of course, his book Part Reptile is available at Amazon Australia, and of course Diamond bookstores all across Australia as well. Dan, we hope the wife feels better. Sorry for keeping you up so late, and thank you so much for taking the time and coming onto the program. It's been a lot of fun.
No problem, guys. Always good talking to you. I'm sure I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Dan. Bye-bye. There he is, guys. Dan Hardy, the one and only man himself, jumping on the program super late at night, and literally after coming back from the hospital after his wife dislocated her arm. So really appreciate him jumping on and give us some excellent analysis. That's it, man. Another show, another episode wrapped up in the bag. I'm really pumped for UFC 226. Hopefully you guys are pumped alongside us and excited to watch the fights this weekend. We keep saying UFC 226. I almost forget the Tough 27 finale. That's going to be exciting as well. As we wrap up, a couple of quick predictions. Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier. Anyone particularly that you're leaning towards here, Dennis?
Yeah, I just think Stipe is going to get it done. I can see it. I like it because Sean believes that DC's going to win, and Dan outlined why he believes Stipe has the advantage here. I'm sort of more leaning towards Dan's thoughts on this fight. I just think Stipe is going to be too quick, too big, and it's going to be difficult for DC to sort of implement his game here. I think the footwork is going to be too good. The power is going to be too strong in the punches. But it's funny because I predict Stipe is going to win, but I'd like to see DC win because, look, it's not really a lose situation for me. If Stipe wins, obviously it would be a great victory for him. But if DC wins, I think it sets up a lot of fun matchups as well. So I'm not going to be heartbroken either way, Cass.
Yeah, I mean, DC versus Lesnar, I think that'd be really interesting. I'm kind of picking DC to win here, man. Like, I feel like logic says Stipe is going to win. I think Dan Hardy did a really good job outlining why he will win and why he should win. But Stipe has been taken down by guys in the past that weren't really wrestlers, and DC's easily the best wrestler he's ever faced. And we did see Stipe being very tired in that Francis Ngannou fight, and he was the one doing the offensive wrestling. He was winning that fight. So, if it does end up being a really grinding fight, we know DC can grind. We kind of know Stipe can grind, but the biggest question for me is if DC does take Stipe down, can he hold him down? And I kind of feel like that power may wane a little bit in the later rounds. I'm picking DC to win here.
Let's talk about the co-main, Max Holloway, Brian Ortega. This is super tough for me. It's a throw-up for me. I'm picking Max Holloway, but just based on the fact that Max has been in these big title fights before. He's been on this stage before, and I think his experience in these tough fight situations will sort of help him edge this one out. I do think that Ortega has a good shot here of winning, but I'm going to pick Max Holloway here. What about you, Cass?
I think with Max's footwork, his lateral movement, I think he's going to be on the outside. And he's going to be picking Ortega apart. I'm picking Max Holloway here. I don't think it's going to be a finish, but I think as the rounds go on, from about the third round onwards, it's going to be pretty definitive and pretty clear. And we have seen Ortega, even though I think Ortega's gone more times 5 rounds than Max Holloway. I think he's gone twice. Max has only gone once back in the day. But we do see a little bit of drop off towards the end with Ortega. So I think it's going to be a decision by Max Holloway.
Look at Ngannou and Derrick Lewis. I think Francis Ngannou is going to get it done here. I think Derrick Lewis has the opportunity to implement a good game plan. Obviously, we all know he's killer on the mount. He's killer on the ground. I just don't know if he's going to get Francis Ngannou down in that position. I think Ngannou is going to catch him before it happens. So I'm picking Ngannou here. Who are you going with here, Cass?
Man, they both got knockout power. They both got pretty good chins. I think Ngannou's chin's better, to be honest. And like John Morgan said, the speed, if they're both going in there trading in the pocket, I think Ngannou wins that pretty much every single time. I think even his technique's better. So yeah, I'm definitely going Ngannou here.
And finally, Chiesa and Anthony Pettis. It's tough. Pettis, he's such a good fighter. He's got so many different skills, but it's just, we're not looking at the same Pettis we once were. There's something off with Pettis, and I'm not sure if it was the stuff that was happening in his personal life that was affecting him mentally going into his fights. But for me, Chiesa, he's just tough all around in all the areas that Pettis is good in. Chiesa is good in as well. I believe Chiesa is going to take this one. I don't think it's going to be a finish, but I do think it will be a decision win for Chiesa. What do you think here, Cass?
I'm with you all the way, man. I think with Chiesa, the way he's able to take guys down, I think that there's going to be a lot of that. Pettis has a really, really, really good guard. I mean, I still remember, and again, this is years and years and years ago, but the Clay Guida fight where Guida took him down and he was in his guard, and a lot of people still thought that arguably Pettis won that fight. I think if Chiesa can submit him, which I don't know that he necessarily can. If he can, that's going to be a huge, huge feather in his cap. But even if he can't, I think this is going to be a fairly crowning victory for Michael Chiesa, and I definitely think he gets the decision.
Just quickly, I was going to say, with the tough finale, I actually think Brad Tavares might beat Israel Adesanya. Well, that's going to be my pick for this one. I just think Tavares is sort of back on in his old ways, on his sort of winning streak. I think he's got confidence again, and he is a very, very tough competitor. Now, I remember when Tavares fought Robert Whittaker, and I thought Tavares was going to beat Robert Whittaker. So, you know, I was wrong there. If I'm wrong here, I'd be very happy to see Israel Adesanya win this fight. It would be a big deal for him, big deal for New Zealand MMA and, you know, Australian MMA as well. But to me, I have to pick Brad Tavares in this fight. Who are you going with on this one?
I'm really torn here. John Morgan really threw... Okay, so basically, I saw Dan Hardy speaking about this matchup, and he said that the fights that Brad Tavares sort of struggles in are the ones with the guys who have a very awkward style, who do unorthodox movements, and that's definitely Israel Adesanya. The one thing here is the smaller cage, and I just wonder whether Israel's factored that in. He's a smart guy, obviously, but I just wonder if he has, and if he hasn't, how much that may potentially throw him off on fight night. I'm still going to pick Israel here. I think that he's going to rise to the occasion. I think even if he hasn't factored that in, he's sort of, you know, his motto is stay woke, stay broke. It might wake him up in that fight, and I think maybe if he sort of has his back against the cage, and if he's losing that fight, he might get a little... Because he sometimes sort of looks bored. Like in the Marvin Vettori fight, he looked a little bit bored, and I think that when guys sort of give him a high challenge, he rises to the occasion. So I kind of... And again, I'm sort of paraphrasing a lot of what Dan Hardy said, but I am picking Israel Adesanya in this one.
Hashtag Hobo Life. Check it out on Instagram. Israel's posted a lot of stuff like that. It's going to be really interesting. I like it because some of our predictions are a little bit opposite, and usually whenever we predict stuff, sometimes things don't go to plan. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend. Guys, again, just a quick reminder, it's going to be an earlier episode of Submission Radio next week, a day after the event. We'll be giving our reactions and breaking down some of these big fights that are coming down. So I can't wait, Cass. Of course, you guys can check that out at the usual place on YouTube, or on all the listening places where you guys like to listen to us. Usually iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher. I mean, the list goes on. Check it out. Podcast One. We'll be on there breaking it down.
And give us your predictions in the comments below as well, if you are checking it out on YouTube.
Yeah, give us your predictions. Let us know, I suppose, who you're siding with. What I love about this episode is we had 3 different dudes on. All of them kind of had some different thoughts about some of the fights. And now you listen to it, and you probably had your own thoughts, and you're like, all right, but after listening to this, does this sway my opinion? Does it change it? And who are you going to go with? So Let us know in the comment section below what your prediction is, and maybe which one of the guys on the episode today kind of made you change your mind, if you have changed your mind after listening to this episode of Submission Radio. We will be back earlier next week, a day after the pay-per-view, to give you guys our thoughts and reactions. Don't forget to follow us on social media. It's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we will be back to break down all this craziness. Have a safe week, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Submission Radio.